What's that sound? It's For Amusement Only, the EM and Bingo Pinball Podcast. Welcome back to For Amusement Only. This is Nick Baldridge, and tonight I have a special guest, Sal Mazzeo. Sal, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing okay. Just living up here in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Very good, very good. And we talked a little bit beforehand. It's pretty chilly this time of year, fluctuating, right? So.
Oh, yeah. We're going through the full gamut of weather. Was it March comes in like a lamb, goes out like a lion, or something like that. Well, April's going to be kind of chilly here too, at least starting off, and windy too. So.
Yeah. Well, it's a good time to do some projects, work on some collection stuff. And with that in mind, I wanted to give you a call and just discuss your history in collecting and what your focus is. So I visited you up in Ohio in January, I believe, and I got to come see your excellent collection and play every machine that you had. And I've got to say, it was beautiful and eye-opening. I am not well-versed in your focus, which is slot machines. And,
that's right.
I had played a couple, mechanical slot machines, but I'm not, I don't really know much about them. And so this was really neat to see because you've got quite the varied collection, and many of them have very different features and so forth. So I thought we'd start with, how did you get into collecting?
Yeah, okay, sure thing. I mean, I think I always had an interest in antiques in general, but we started kind of messing around with coin-op games even when I was in college in the late 1970s. I went to school at Lehigh University in Pennsylvania. And in fact, I lived in a social house, and I was the social chairman for a couple of years. And I, to try and make the house more interesting, instead of just having beer and pizza parties or whatever, bands come in and stuff like that for our social events for our house, just during the week, I had connected with and contracted with one of the local coin-op vendors, and actually got a pinball machine in there and a foosball table, and one of the guys donated an old pool table, stuff like that. So we had some coin-op games in there, and I got talking with the guy who was the vendor, owned the coin-op vending company, and he had talked a little bit about slot machines, and I didn't realize they were still even running around. At that time, they were not running legally; they were running illegally. Like VFW or American Legion, those kind of places, just kind of behind the scenes. And so I thought that was kind of intriguing. And once again, as I was in college there in the late 70s, I dated this one girl in more central Pennsylvania, because Lehigh's closer to the eastern edge of the state. And I saw my first slot machine in the wild, which was a electromechanical Bally drawbell. So right after World War II, like 1946 time frame, kind of slot machine, electromechanical. I thought, hey, this really looks kind of neat. And it was just actually sitting, although covered, it was just on the guy's back porch, so there was a cover over the porch, but it was not an enclosed porch, so the machine was obviously not in good shape. And I asked the guy on a whim, I said, well, now, you be ever interested in selling that? And he didn't really want to sell it, and he said, yeah, I'll sell it to you for $1,000. I think I'll pass on that. So, especially since it had been exposed to the elements for 40 years or 30 years, whatever at that point. But it kind of got me interested in that. So next, after I graduated college in 1979, I came out to Cincinnati, where I have remained for most of my career. Went to work for Procter & Gamble, and because I was interested in antiques, I would visit antique shops. I had like an old Victrola and wind-up phonographs, that kind of thing. And at that time, there was a couple of antique shops in Cincinnati that had some old slot machines in it. So I thought, this is kind of neat. Even though I think a pinball is more fun to play in general, the slot machines, for some reason, just kind of piqued my interest. I thought, this is really kind of cool. I'd like to know more about them. So over time, over about a year or two, maybe a couple of years after I moved out here to Cincinnati, I ended up buying a slot machine. It was a Mills machine, which is the most common mechanical slot machine. They made the most of them. Most of them have survived that are out there. And it was a very common post-World War II machine called a high top. So I got this 10-cent Mills high top, bought it from this antique dealer. At the time, it needed some work, needed some restoration. It was working, but it was pretty dirty. And I remember the guy had called me up. This antique dealer had called me up. This is like maybe 1981 or early 82. I think was when I bought it. He called me up, and he was like some of the operators out there. He was, somewhat of a little bit slippery character. This antique dealer in downtown Cincinnati. He called me up late in the day and said, "Hey, I got some slot machines in here." I said, "Okay." He said, "You want to come down tonight and see them?" I said, "Tonight? Well, okay. I thought you were only open during the day." Yeah, but I got them in tonight, so come on and check them out. And I ended up going there in the evening, and he had like 7 or 8, maybe 9 Mills high tops machines. And I said, "Okay, where'd you get these?" And he said, "Well, they were running them in Tennessee, and the cops found out about it, and so they wanted to get them out of state, and they shipped them up here, so we're selling them as antiques." I said, "They were running them? What do you mean they were running them?" I figured I knew what he meant, but I thought I'd better make sure. And he said, "Oh, they were playing them down in some, I don't know if it was some pool hall or whatever, some bar in the back of some bar or something like that in Tennessee." Mm-hmm. They were still running the machines as gambling machines. And it's like, "Oh, okay." I said, "Well, no, wait a minute. Are these hot? I don't want to buy something that I'm going to get arrested for." He said, No. They got them out there for the police where we're selling them as antiques." And I said, "Okay." So I ended up buying one of them, mm-hmm. and that kind of got me on the path of restoring antique coin ops, mostly slot machines. And so that was my first slot machine, and it was a 10-cent machine. 10-cent machines in mechanical slots are not the greatest coin to have because they have a tendency to jam. The coin is so small, it's not great. So I restored it. I kept it for a year or two, and there's a big show twice a year up in Chicago, Chicagoland show. Matter of fact, it's this weekend. Couldn't think of it. I go up like every other year to it. So I took that slot machine up there because it's like, okay, I want to see what else is out there, and I ended up trading it for a couple other coin ops. One was one of the mutoscope, the real machines you'd see the pictures on. You'd turn the handle on the crank and see all these girly pictures and stuff like that. Although it's pretty tame by today's standards. So I ended up trading it to that mill slot machine for one of these peep show mutoscopes and a penny drop machine that has pockets, and you push a little coin in there, and it dances around all the pins on the front of this machine. And if you get in one of the pockets, you turn the handle and it pays out. So it's another form of gambling machine. So I ended up trading at this dealer out of Washington D.C. named Ken Durham. So my first slot machine came and went, and I had a couple other machines. And this is the 1980s, so there was a fair number of machines out there at that point. So after I traded that first slot machine, I started looking for other ones, and my wife was rather understanding, which was great, because I was buying a bunch of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so back then, that's before the internet. So this is, like I said, early to mid-'80s. And so the way I was finding the machines was through these newspapers, these antique auction newspapers called Antique Week, Tri-State Trader. So I'd get them, I think, every other week or something like that, and I'd parse through them and look for auctions that might have coin-op games. And so I started going to auctions around the tri-state area here. So it was like 3-4 hour drive. I would drive up to 3-4 hours to go to an auction, and the machines usually be beat up. They were coming out of somebody's basement or a VFW Hall or American Legion or wherever they were located, and started buying machines. And some of them were auctioned. A couple of the auctions or acquisitions were rather unusual. One auction, there was an auction for what's called the Jennings Little Duke machine up in, where was it? Oh, Michigan. It was in Michigan. And I really didn't want to drive to Michigan for this machine, although I really wanted it. It's a very unusual machine. It's got discs instead of reels on it. Still have it.
How far away is Michigan from you?
Well, you're talking probably, this particular auction in Michigan was like 400 miles away.
Okay.
300 to 400 miles. So, yeah, 300 to 400 miles. So it's not something I really wanted to drive all the way up there if I didn't end up winning the bid. So I was like, oh, but I really wanted this machine. Little Dukes are really neat machines. Like I said, they're very unique. They're Depression-era machines. They're usually 1 cent.
Okay.
And I still have the machine, actually, in my basement. And so I convinced the auctioneer. I said, well, can I bid on the phone? And I gave him credentials and bank account numbers and stuff like that so he wouldn't think I was some crackpot. And after a little bit of hemming and hawing, he said, you know what? I'll let you do it. So I ended up bidding on the phone for this machine, and I won it. I didn't pay all that much for it. I think I paid $1,600 for it or something like that, which is pretty good for a machine like that. And then the thing was, I got to drive up to Michigan now to pick it up. Well, I talked to the guy and said, okay, buddy, any wild chance you're going to be coming down anywhere south, through Cincinnati? There's a major highway that goes from Michigan to Florida called I-75, Interstate 75, U.S. Federal Highway. And he said, you know what? Actually, I need to go down there next weekend to drop off some, whatever it was. He was dropping off a jukebox or something like that, or some other antiques. So I ended up really being lucky. I got the machine for a great price over the phone, and he ended up meeting him here in the Cincinnati area without having to drive to Michigan.
Wow.
So that was pretty cool. And I'm just remembering some of these stories now as I'm thinking about this stuff, because that was 30 years ago. It was in the mid-'80s. The other unusual one was a machine I got out of Louisville, Kentucky, Louisville's only about 90 miles away, and there's I think he's in ill health, if he's even still alive, guy down there named Larry Sweeney, who helped to get me into the hobby and helped to make sure that the antique laws in Kentucky for ownership of slot machines would be legal. Larry was a great guy. A friend of mine, Larry Sweeney, was down there, and he knew I was looking for slot machines and stuff, so we'd meet and talk on a regular basis back there in the 80s and 90s till his health took a turn for the worse in the late 90s. He had a stroke and such, but in the late 90s. But he said, I know this guy that has some slot machines in his basement. I said, okay. And where are they? And so Larry described them. They were Mills machines. I said, okay, well, that's pretty common. He says, yeah, these are more interesting. These are bonus machines. And at that time, I didn't know that much about Mills machines or slot machines. I was still learning. There was a few books out there, but it was hard to, not too many on slots. And he described it, and essentially it was a machine that spelled the word bonus one letter at a time with symbols in the first reel of the slot machine. So it's a pretty neat machine.
And it's a carryover feature.
Yes, it is. It's a specialty feature, and that's what I kind of got into as I got more and more into slot machines, was the more unusual and interesting machines instead of the ones that were more conventional. So whether it was 3 discs instead of 3 reels, like that Mills, like the Jennings Little Duke I just mentioned, or this bonus machine, which I still have. It's a bonus high top, so they made a couple of versions of bonus, one pre-war, one post-war. The pre-war one has a horse's head on the front, and the post-war one is a high top, so I still have the high top one downstairs in my game room. So he said, hey, I got these machines. This guy got them. I said, well, how'd he get them? He says, well, it's like this. I said, okay. He said he was a policeman. I said, Larry, I don't like the way this is going, where this conversation's going. He says, no. He said, okay. He's a retired policeman. He was actually injured in the line of duty, not getting these slot machines, but as a detective in Louisville. And sadly, he was shot in the back and paralyzed, so he's in a wheelchair. So he was retired from the police force. And I guess before he was seriously injured like that, apparently when the police would confiscate things like slot machines, instead of ending up in the property room and being destroyed, which is kind of what you think they would be, it ended up in his basement. I said, oh, okay, well, I guess partners in crime and such, I'm not doing anything illegal. If he got them illegally, that's his problem. So he had a nickel, dime, and quarter matching bonus high top slot machines. And he also had a couple other machines that mysteriously and miraculously appeared in his basement that were newer vintage electromechanicals. So I went down there, and and at that time I didn't have enough to buy all 3 of them. I was buying machines. So one of my buddies in Northern Kentucky went with me, and I fronted the money for the nickel and the quarter machine, and my buddy got stuck with the dime machine. He wasn't too happy about that, but it's like, hey, sorry, I set up the deal. If you want the machine, this is what it is. He bought the dime machine, I bought the nickel and the quarter. And I really didn't want 2 of the same machines, so I ended up selling the quarter machine to another one of the Chicagoland dealers named Tom Kroll, who actually just passed away about a year and a half ago. But this is the mid-'80s. So that's how I acquired another one of my machines, through a policeman that had acquired the machines under somewhat questionable means there. So most of the machines I've acquired, let's say, have been from local auctions, and they'll be all beat up, and I will take them apart mechanically and also strip the paint off and then repaint them. I've got a compressor on a sprayer and all that, and I would repaint them so make them look good aesthetically and mechanically. Mm-hmm. And there are some books out there even that were published in the early to mid-'80s by a couple of guys that since passed on, Mead and Geddes, Dan Mead and Bob Geddes out of California, had published how to repair slot machines and such, one for each of the major manufacturers. And those were good, really, really good guidelines to know how to do it. So you do some of that, and you do some trial and error. And so over the years, through auctions or things like this, like my friend here, I would acquire machines, and over time I've acquired just a wide variety of mostly slot machines, just because, like I said, I think pinballs are actually more fun to play, but for some reason I just really was really interested and excited to get into the slot machines, and my background, even though I'm an accountant by trade, I always kind of worked on mechanical things. I used to work on cars before the microprocessors came in with the computers in the early 80s. So mechanical ones were just more of a natural fit for me. Mm-hmm. So I really enjoyed working on them and such, and did that for a number of years. After our daughter was born and I got more tied up with all that, I in the mid-'90s, I haven't collected as many, but I've still picked up some over the years. And also, I didn't want to have just slot machines. I did pick up a couple of pinball machines. And I bought a 45 jukebox, which I sold to my old secretary at Procter & Gamble. When I got tired of it, and I ended up getting a CD jukebox, which I've got downstairs now in my game room, which has a lot more capability than the old 45 jukebox. So you pick up stuff like that. And there would be auctions up here. There was one north of the city, and now they're in Indiana, which is west of here. But there was a big auction twice a year that primarily featured carousel horses, the carved wooden pieces of art, mm-hmm. really. Carousel horses about 100 years, that were made about 100 years ago, in the early 1900s. But in addition to carousel horses, they would have coin-op devices, slot machines. And I bought a couple of 2 or 3 slot machines at that auction. I bought a couple other things. They had a wide variety of coin-op devices out there, actually, or even game room articles. For example, they had one time they had a barber chair, totally restored, in the 1930s, and nobody would bid on it. I mean, they would bid almost nothing. So I ended up picking it up, even though I had no intention of buying a barber chair, but I was fitting out a game room in the basement, which I still have. I think I paid like $250, $275 for this barber chair. It was fully functional, totally restored. Or there was another one. There was a coin-op Bally target game from the late 1950s with a Halloween theme called Spook Gun. Mm-hmm. It's spooks and ghosts and all this stuff on it. And once again, nobody would bid on it. I think I picked that up for about the same price, about $250. And it was working. Now, there was a couple of things I had to play with it, but thanks to Jeff Lawton, I've picked up a lot of skills in that area. He's been terrific and helped me in a lot of ways. But it was already working. I just you have to make adjustments to it because it's kind of crude. It's a very basic kind of game, late 1950s target game. Mm-hmm. So I'd go to these auctions north of the city on a frequent basis, and these carousel horse auctions, and I pick up all kinds of stuff like that. So I got a number of things like that, as well as, like you said, 2 or 3 slot machines from the same auctioneer. And the way I got into, I had 2 pinball machines, and the way I got into them was, not surprisingly, I was going to a slot machine auction. It was one of the dealers was going out of business and such, and he had a bunch of parts and stuff like that. Well, it was slot machine parts and things like that. I had 2 or 3 slot machines, maybe 2, but they had like maybe 6 or 7 pinball machines. Well, I had no intention of buying a pinball machine when I went to this auction, but they had one. They had a number of these 1970s electromechanical pinballs, and I thought, wow, boy, they were selling. I mean, I wasn't even sure if they were working. I thought, well, I'm not sure I can fix this thing. They weren't plugged in or anything like that, but I looked inside and said, well, it looks like it's all here. It doesn't look like it's missing. Anything's missing, but I didn't really know what I was doing. Well, one of them kind of struck my eye. It was a Gottlieb Royal Flush, 1976, 77 kind of electromechanical. I thought, this is really a cool-looking game. Because it was a card theme, just obviously with Royal Flush being cards and such. So I thought, that's kind of neat looking. I thought, what the heck, they were trying to sell them. Nobody was bidding on them. So I thought, what the heck? This is mid 1980s.
Wow.
So 85, 86, and they were bidding like $10, $20, $50. And I thought, what the heck? What have I got to lose? So I ended up buying it. I think it was $110 or $125 for the game. And I thought, well, what have I got to lose? I think I had a compact car at that point. I had to go back home, and my wife had a station wagon. So I went back home and got the station wagon to load. I wasn't even prepared to buy something like that. I was ready to buy a slot machine or parts. So I had to go back home, get the car, bring it back to the auctioneer, get this. So I paid $110, $125. When I did plug it in, I said a prayer first, and I said, please work. And it actually did light up and everything. It was mostly working, and I could see, there's a couple things. I think I was able to figure out just a couple. It looked like some of the contact points were stuck and things. So I actually got it working. So I was pretty lucky. I picked up a pinball machine for $110, $125, whatever I did. So I thought, hey, this is good. And that's actually how I ended up meeting Jeff Lawton was through that pinball machine, because I worked for Procter & Gamble for many years, and now I work for General Electric aircraft engines, but in the accounting field, tax accounting field. But we had a chance. My wife and I both worked for Procter & Gamble in finance. We both had an opportunity to go over and work in Europe for Procter & Gamble in 1992 and 93. And so we said, in Brussels, which has kind of been in the news lately. Great, wonderful city, actually. But we worked over in Brussels for a couple of years, and then the company went through a restructuring. Procter & Gamble did, so they said, no, it's too expensive to have all you expatriates over there. So we were there a couple of years, came home after a couple of years. So that's fine. It was a good time. It was interesting, great experience. And because we were in a much smaller house over there, they call them villas, they didn't call them houses, and they rent for a lot more. We had a bunch of our stuff in storage. Well, Procter & Gamble had paid for me to move over there, brought over my car and stuff like that from the U.S. So when we came back, they take care of all your goods and help you move into another house and so on and so forth. Well, the pinball machine that I bought, that Royal Flush, I bought in the mid-'80s, had been sitting in storage for a couple of years, and it wasn't totally working. I thought, great. So I wasn't that good with electromechanical stuff. I was still learning how to do some of it. And, so I got to figure out how to get this thing working. So I asked our human resources manager, I said, well, no, wait a minute, there's stuff that's been, some stuff's been damaged or needs to be fixed or whatever. There's in storage while we were in Europe for a couple of years, you guys sent us over and back. And the HR manager said, well, we'll be able to get that fixed. I said, okay. That works for me, saved me some time, because we were building a house and such at that time. The last thing I needed to do was to mess with that, something I wasn't as familiar with at that point, such as electromechanical games. And somehow, I'm not exactly. I think the way I got Jeff's name was through my Louisville buddy, Larry Sweeney. I think he was the one who told me about that. So he said, there's this guy who lives up in Anderson Township. I said, Anderson Township? That's where I just moved to. He said, oh, yeah, he gave me Jeff's name. I think that's how I got it. And I met Jeff. Procter & Gamble paid him to fix up the game. Didn't need much work, just needed some. But like I said, I was pretty busy. We're building a new house, getting back into the swing of things at work here in the U.S. And so that was like 1994. Yeah, early 94. Because we were over there in 92, 93, and moved back like early 94. And so I got to meet Jeff, and we've been friends now for over 20 years, and he's taught me a whole bunch of stuff on electromechanical, and he's just a natural whiz on this such. But that's kind of how I got into pinball. Got that pinball machine, and the other pinball I got was just through eBay. I'm not bought much stuff through eBay, but I did buy about the year 2000, I guess it was, a Williams Riverboat Gambler, and it with my antique slot machine gambling game room. It just was a natural to get something like that. So one of my friends, doctor in Northern Kentucky, right across the river, Ohio River here, had one. He had this same game. And I saw this, I thought, hey, this is really cool. I like this. It's got a little roulette wheel on it. It's got blackjack. It's got the slot machine feature, cards, of course, and such. So I went on one of the I think it was Gameroom Magazine, one of the dealers in Gameroom Magazine, and I found a riverboat gambler, and I think it was about $1,000 out of New York State, and he shipped it to me. So that's how I got my second pinball. So I only have the 2 pinballs, but they've been a lot of fun. I mean, really, in all honesty, I think they're the most fun to play. I just get turned on by the slot machines, and I loved restoring them, and I've actually pretty much filled out my collection and my basement game room. So now I work on mostly other people's machines just to kind of keep my hand on it and have some fun with it, and of course play the machines too. But so most of my collection has been slot machines. Like I say, I do have a CD jukebox. I do have the Barber chair. I do have a Barber light that came from my buddy Larry Sweeney in Louisville. I have a couple of coin-op scales, one of which I bought at the Chicagoland show, one of which I got from Larry Sweeney. I've got actually a player piano, which is not a coin-op, but it's a game room type device. Let's see. Of course, the 2 pinballs. I have the Peep Show, and so, like I said, the Target gun, that Valley Spook gun from the late 1950s Halloween theme Target gun. And it just has allowed me to meet all kinds of different people, whether it's Chicagoland or locally here in the area, who were into coin ops, and have some fun. And I've been to the York show several times. I haven't had a chance to go the last 2 or 3 years because our daughter's in college, and it always happens to be her fall break time. So it's really when she graduates here in a year or two after she gets her master's. I'll better start going back to the York show because that's been a real blast too to play the pinballs at York.
Yeah, great.
Really have enjoyed that.
Yeah, we've been setting up the bingo row last year, and and this year it's supposed to be even bigger potentially. So yeah, hopefully that'll still be going strong. And I had no idea you went to York. That's great.
Yeah, I've been there, I think, 3 times. The reason I can't is it's the last 2-3 years now. I think it's been 3 years since I'm going. It's pretty much always my daughter's, she's in college, a fall break for college. Yeah. It's like, so it's unfortunate because I'd be 3/4 of the way to go visit her in eastern Pennsylvania, which is where Lehigh University is located. But I was like, I can't do that. She's going to be out here in Cincinnati, not there. So no, I've gone to York at least 3 times, and I've gone to Chicagoland probably 10 times. The Chicagoland show, you see, doesn't have much pinball. It's more slot machines, trade stimulators, jukeboxes. They have 1 or 2 dealers that come in with maybe 10 pinballs, something like that, between the 2 of the dealers. Other game room type devices, a lot of signage, things like that. But the Chicagoland show, if you're into coin ops, is a blast, and there's they've been doing it for over 30 years. And it really is a lot of fun. And there's every 2 or 3 years, one of the main premier collectors up there in the Chicago area, especially west of Chicago and St. Charles, opens up his home. And they only do it every 2-3 years. And when I use the word home, that's not really doing justice to it. He's a guy named Jasper Sanfilippo. He's a mechanical engineer who is the one that developed and patented and created those little packets of mustard, mayonnaise, ketchup that you get on your when you go get a hamburger at Burger King or whatever, as well as other inventions. Well, he made a lot of money on that, and most of his interest and collection has been on musical devices like the orchestrions and the coin-op pianos and all these musical devices that are very expensive and very ornate, and they play a violin or play pianos and just all kinds of stuff like that. But it's no ordinary home. It's a 44,000 square foot mansion, and then it's also an outbuilding besides the mansion, which has a full size carousel. You would, the horses and all that that works. You can actually get on and ride.
That's amazing.
As well in this outbuilding. It's a pretty amazing place. I've been up there 4 times now. They open it up every 2-3 years for these to time it with these shows. And in addition to the full size carousel in the outbuilding, let's say not his mansion, but the outbuilding, which is right next to it, he also has a train in it. I mean, literally a real train from the early 1900s. It's a steam train from like 1910 with the Pullman cars and stuff like that. So it's got the engine, the caboose, and then 1 or 2 other cars. So it's pretty amazing. It's quite an event to do it. So for the COCA collectors, the Coin Op Collectors Association, which has a magazine, comes out like 3 times a year. has done it. Jeff has not seen it. Well, some other friends have, but I actually videotaped and showed it to Jeff. But it's a pretty amazing place. So for the the Coin Op Collector Association, COCA collectors, which are mostly slot machines, trade simulators, jukeboxes, it's a pretty neat place to see. So I've been up there 4 times. So anybody has a chance to see that when they do open this up every 2-3 years. It's pretty amazing.
Sounds like it's worth the trip there. Yeah.
It really is. I've tried to get Jeff Lutton to go up there with me, and at this point it hasn't worked with his schedule. Mm-hmm. But I tried to do that because it is something else to see. I'm going up there with some of my my GE engineering buddies. That one of them collects slot machines also. I've helped him with some of this stuff. We've gone up there now a couple times. My wife's seen it, so I've seen it 4 times. Pretty neat. But it's mostly musical devices, like these huge player pianos and orchestrions and all kinds of things like that. But he also has quite a few slot machines of very high value. And then these other things like the carousel and the train and all this other stuff. He's a pretty amazing guy. He's getting up there in years. He's probably about 80 years old now, so I'm not sure how many more years he's going to be doing it. Or it's actually turned his mansion and outbuilding into a foundation. So I'm hoping that even if he passes, he's a great guy, Jasper is, that his wife or his kids who also live up there with him will continue to do this and to put on these spectacles, because it's really something to see. The mansion alone is amazing, but the outbuilding is too. So last time they did it, I think it was the fall of 2014. So it might be coming up at the end of this year or next year if they do it again. So we'll see what happens. So the point is that there's a lot of neat people in the hobby that you get a chance to meet. And whether it's here or in Chicago or all different parts of the country, that COCA Association actually does like a summer convention, they call it. They'll do it, and then they'll highlight collectors in that area. And they've done them in Florida and California, I think Arizona, Boston, New York. The one this year is in Colorado and Denver. There's a number of collectors out there, so they'll have like a little convention. And then they'll highlight that some of the collectors will open up their homes and show you their games and such. They'll have some auction, a little mini auction among the collectors and such. So there are a lot of neat people that I've met over the years. Dick Buchel was one of the neat guys who really was a Chicago advertising executive and passed away, brain tumor, unfortunately, in 1998. But he was kind of like the godfather of a lot of the coin-op games. He wrote a number of books. I get to know him pretty well. And he wrote quite a few books, and really was just a terrific guy, just a tremendous resource. He would do a lot of research on patents and on companies and stuff like that. So besides the books, he wrote many articles for the various versions of the really slot machine magazines, I should call it. It's the Chicagoland show. There's been a slot machine magazine going under a variety of different names for probably 35 years now. Initially called the Coin Slot, and then it was Loose Change, and all these other different names it would have. And right now, the magazine comes out 3 times a year. So that one I think I mentioned previously, the COCA magazine, Coin Operated Collectors Association. So Dick Buchel was the kind of the godfather of all that, and just did amazing research that provided a lot of the genesis and just the history of coin-op games, not just slots, but scales and jukeboxes and trade stimulators and all kinds of stuff like that, going back to the 1890s, which is when all this stuff was created.
Jeffrey talks very highly of him.
Definitely high-end stuff. Definitely, and I've got one high-end game like that. It's made about 1900 by a company called, or a guy named Gable was the guy's name, and they're like a roulette wheel, a vertical roulette wheel is what they are, and they were the forerunner of the 3-reel slot machines. And they're the ones that came out in the 1890s. So I say mine's from about 1900. I got it from another COCA collector who really wasn't collecting that kind of stuff. He picked it up from somebody in Las Vegas as part of a bigger deal. This guy mostly collected jukeboxes. But I ended up picking up one of them about 10 years ago. So I've got one of those old games. They call them floor machines, and they're neat.
And how tall is it?
It's
just about
6 feet. With the coin head on, it's about 6 feet. It's pretty neat. So it'll have like 6 different slots, and it'll be colors on a color wheel. It's like a roulette, and And so they'd be like red and black, and they pay for 2 for 1. So you put a nickel in, most of them are nickel, and you get 10 cents back. And there'd be some that pay 5 for 1 and 10 for 1, and 100 for 1 or stuff like that. So they're called floor machines, and they're pretty neat. But they've gone up quite a bit in price the last 10 years. I picked one up about 10 years ago before they went too crazy. But they're neat.
And that particular machine has beautiful mirroring in that centerpiece.
Yes. And most of them are like that, but that's why they're kind of pricey. I said these were made mostly in the 1890s and the first decade of the 20th century. They kind of fell out of favor when the 3-reel slot machine came around 1905, and then built from there. So they were popular for about 20, 25 years. So by 1915, there weren't many of these things sold. I think they were still technically sold by Mills and Jennings and Watling and all the coin slot machine manufacturers, even through the 20s, but there weren't many of them being built. I mean, they were kind of antiques even then. So they've been a lot of fun. They've been a lot of fun. So I just have one of them, but you'll see them at that show up there in Chicago too, or at Collectors' Homes, and they're really cool. So
yes, it's very different.
Oh yeah.
from the standard 3-reel. Now, are the mechanicals very different inside?
Yeah, the mechanical slot machine was basically invented by a Bavarian immigrant named Augustus Fay. Changed the name, but went by the name of Charles Fay in San Francisco about 1905. And most of the mechanical slot machines, they have some changes and differences and such, but that same basic 1905 design pretty much stayed up through the 60s until Bally came up with its land. I mean, there was electromechanical machines that were consoles, that floor machines, of a later different type than the earlier floor machines I mentioned. But most of the mechanical countertops that people think of as a mechanical slot machine, it really didn't change that much from when Augustus Fay built that in 1905 until, let's see what that been. Yeah, like 1963, Bally came out with the landmark machine called the Money Honey, which was pretty much the slot machine like you'd see. Well, now there's more sophisticated ones out there at the casinos these days, but were the slot machines that were in place for probably 30 years then. So but they're very different than the floor machine I was describing, the 1900, circa 1900 floor machine. There were some similarities in them, in that, let's say, for example, slot machines, the 3-reel slot machines, until the 1930s, were called 10-stop machines. And so they'd have 20 symbols on those 3 reels you see that spin around, but there was only 10 type of combinations you could really hit on it. So they kind of tricked you on that thing. So you might think, oh, I almost hit the cherry or the plum or the bar or the bell or the orange. No, you didn't, because there was no way you could hit that. All you could hit was every other symbol, and that really came from those floor machines, because the floor machines did the same kind of thing, where for the higher end machine combinations that paid like 20 to 1 or whatever, you saw the symbols on this like this vertical roulette wheel, this floor machine, this circa 1900 machine, but you couldn't hit it. So that's where they got the idea, and they did the same thing when they came up with the 3-reel machines. Like, we're going to fool them. We're going to think they almost hit it, and did. But
well, that keeps you
exactly. They were gambling devices. I mean, you couldn't get patents on them. There's very few patents for gambling devices, especially in that time when they weren't really legal.
That was actually a question that I had for you, because I have Dave Christensen's book.
Got that book.
And I was paging through it today, doing a little bit of research, and I noticed that the mechanisms are almost identical that he's illustrated in this book for all these different manufacturers.
Yep. There's a good reason for that. It's because that's a good story too, actually. And I learned all this stuff, through through Dick Buchel and through the Coin-Op magazine. Like I say, Augustus Fay created that first 3-reel slot machine. There were other ones around before that. They were kind of like penny drop machines, or the floor machines I mentioned, circa 1900. Augustus Fay created this. Well, about somewhere in that 1905, 1907 time frame, Augustus Fay, Charles Fay, he just went by Charles, not his given name of Augustus, was running machines, and he built them by hand. The guy was amazing. He was a genius mechanically. He built them by hand. He had them in saloons in San Francisco, and he wouldn't sell them to the saloon keeper. So he would run them and collect whatever portion, I don't know what percentage of the winnings. Well, there was a break-in at one of the saloons in this time frame, this 1905, 1907 time frame. And lo and behold, there wasn't much stolen. About all that was stolen wasn't the money or the drinks or the beer or stuff like that. The only thing stolen was this slot machine owned by Charles Fay and a bar towel. So they were stolen by Mills. I mean, no one could ever prove it because, first off, the things weren't really legal anyway. But Mills stole it, and not to disparage Mills, Herbert Mills and Charlie Mills, all these guys, because everybody was ripping off everybody else's designs at that point because you couldn't patent them anyway. But that's when they all, to answer your question, that's when all these machines kind of got developed. They all used Charles Fay's ideas, and they just continued the same basic design with a few tweaks and improvements and such like that for another 55 years. So
wow.
They do look the same because they all copied each other. And you couldn't patent them, so you couldn't go in the patent office and say, hey, this Watling guy stole my design. No, you won't, because you'd go to jail. So for interstate gambling. So they all ripped off each other. But Mills did it first, stole that machine out of the saloon in San Francisco, and it's been documented that this happened. This is not like any charges were ever pressed for obvious reasons. But they all stole each other's designs. So most of the machines were very, very similar. And they'd even have some of this. For example, when Mills came out with shortly after that theft was called an operator bell, and then but Watling and Kale and Jennings, all the other ones came out with the same kind of machines. So they even stole the names. They didn't use the same names, or the front OK, the FOK, front OK, which was a vending machine in the front to try and make it look like it was a vending machine. They all stole the same names and the same designs and stuff like that because you couldn't patent them. So, and even though these guys, Charlie Fay and all the other ones, Tom Watling, even though they were competitors and you'd think they'd be angry at each other for stealing it, they actually got to be pretty good friends because they were all kind of in that same gambling business together. And so they didn't hold against each other, which is kind of incredible. Because you'll see pictures in the coin-op magazines like from the 1940s when Charlie Fay was still alive, along with Tom Watling, he was still alive, and they were at some of these conventions, these coin-op conventions and such. So yeah, they stole each other's designs. That's why the machines look similar. It's because they were similar. And later you could buy the machines. It was only Charlie Fay that didn't sell the machines. Everybody else, Mills, Watling, Jennings, Kale, would sell the machines to, as they called them, operators, who were the people that actually ran these machines, and usually illegally. And in fact, a number of them were criminals or affiliated with organized crime. For example, here in the Cincinnati area, Newport, Kentucky is right across the river. Well, in the 1950s, Newport, Kentucky was a big gambling and entertainment district. I mean, believe it or not, they actually had entertainers like Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin and all these other people coming here to perform in Newport, Kentucky, until some of the laws started to get passed that shut down the gambling in the U.S. And the first main one that just started it was called the Johnson Act in 1951 for Edwin Johnson, who was a U.S. Senator, that prohibited interstate transportation of gambling devices. And that's why Bally moved out to, and Mills too for that matter, moved out to Nevada, which was still legal. Because when that had, post-World War II, the country kind of got a conscience. They just gone through World War II, lost 500,000 men approximately. And so they were trying to live a better life, and so gambling was like that was an evil thing to do. So post World War II, even before the Johnson Act passed in 1951, gambling started to become outlawed in a lot of places in the U.S. Before then, especially during the Depression or during the war, they didn't really care. That there was gambling devices all around. So these places started to shut down. But Newport, the one over here right across the river from Cincinnati, was big all through the 50s. And then there was another U.S. Senator named Estes Kefauver who helped to shut down Newport. And then later, Bobby Kennedy, who when he was Attorney General, finished it off. At least in terms of widespread gambling. So Newport was a big gambling area up through really until the early 60s till Bobby Kennedy shut it down. because it was funny when my wife and I would go out to, we've been out to Vegas and Reno, a couple other places over the years, like Reno was part of a skiing trip to Lake Tahoe. We met a couple of dealers that were in the casinos. We're not big gamblers, believe it or not, even though I collect slot machines. But not really not big into gambling at all. But we go into the casinos just to see that, and they talk to some of the dealers. And once you know it, lo and behold, a couple of older dealers, this is the mid-1980s, and the dealers had been there like 30 years in Vegas, they came out of Newport. So when they got driven out of Newport, they went to Nevada. And so, yeah, it was amazing. I met 3 or 4 dealers, and I couldn't believe it. And I think I had an Ohio, like a Cincinnati hat or something like that on. And that's how they said, "Oh, you're from Cincinnati?" I said, "Yeah. I was a dealer in Newport." And then that's when I actually started to learn about a lot of this stuff. But Newport was a big gambling area in the 50s and early 60s till, like I say, Estes Kefauver, the senator, and Bobby Kennedy, the attorney general, shut it down. And there was still gambling that went on there even through the 80s, but on a much, much reduced basis. It was wide open in the 50s and 60s, and then it kind of went underground. And then there's some machines around and stuff like that. There's a fair number of slot machines in the Midwest because, well, first off, Chicago, of course, was where most of them were made, except for Kale and Detroit. They were almost all made in Chicago in that time frame until they got driven out to Nevada in the 50s and 60s. So there's just a lot of machines out there, and there's a lot of gambling places, back rooms, VFWs, American Legions, stuff like that had gambling machines, and still do. I think some of them still do. It's kind of dying out, but you see some of that stuff out there. So it's kind of interesting that the Midwest is actually, at least historically, has been a great place to pick up machines, and that helped with all those auctions I went to, because these machines were in people's basements and stuff like that. When I would go to an auction, that's where the auctioneer got them from. Somebody in that town had done that. So the Midwest is actually was pretty much a fertile ground, not so much now, because a lot of it, I think, has been tapped out. It's ended up in people's collections, like mine, over the last 40, 50 years. But in my case, last 30 years. But it's a pretty neat area for gambling devices and such, because of Chicago being such a haven for all that stuff.
So in that book, I noticed that there was at least one Fay machine mentioned. So how long did Charlie Fay keep making machines? He
made them up to the time his son actually took over for him, and the son's name is escaping me. Because there's an interesting story in that too. The son continued to work with him, Charlie's son, and what was his name? Edmund Fay. And was not maybe as talented or as much of a genius as Charlie, but a pretty good inventor himself. And so they continued to make machines up to the 40s. And actually, the grandson of Charlie Fay ran a restaurant and a bar in Reno until about 5, 6, 7 years ago, maybe. Because I met the guy when I went out to that one when we were skiing out there in Reno or in Tahoe, and we went to Reno, and it was called the Liberty Bell Saloon. And any of the coin-out collectors will know this one. It's a neat old. It was a restaurant primarily, but it was a bar too. And he had all kinds of antique games in there from his grandfather, including if you were a coin-out collector, and he sold like 6 versions of his book. He's a 6th edition out now, I think. He's still alive because he went to the Chicagoland show 3-4 years ago. I saw him again. I hadn't seen him in years, and he's in his 80s now. But he's the grandson of Charlie Fay, and so if you were a coin-out collector, then he would take you up to his upper room there, where he had one of those Liberty Bell slot machines. There's only like 4 or 5 out there. The one that his grandfather created, that 1905, that was a progenitor for all of these machines. He had one there, and I got to see it. It's under glass, and so it was really neat to see that, though. But yeah, he had that Liberty Bell Saloon for years out there, all kinds of coin-out games in it and stuff like that. But he just got to be too old. He and his brother, Frank's his brother, ran that Liberty Bell Saloon for years out there in Reno. And yes, I only saw it once, but it was a great collection, a fun place, great guy. But he's published. He's another one of the guys that published books on slot machines, and they're still out there for sale. Matter of fact, as I walk back to my office here. I'm trying to think of the name of the book, because most of the books were published by guys like Dick Buchel. But here we go. Yeah, Slot Machines, A Pictorial History of the First 100. Marshall, that's his name, Marshall Fay. He's the grandson of Charlie Fay, and he's sold off most of his collection, or given it one to his kids, because he's just getting up there in years. But yeah, he's got he had one of those original Liberty Bell slot machines.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a neat machine. It's a little crude compared to the ones obviously that came out later. But Charlie would build these things by hand. I mean, the guy was amazing. He truly was a genius. Truly a genius.
Yeah, that's remarkable.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it. Yeah, he actually autographed it for me. 1990 is when I was out there looking at it now. The Liberty Bells in Reno, Nevada. Wow. He autographed it, and I've got it right here, actually. But he's neat.
Charlie's business practices sound very interesting too, and very unusual.
Oh yeah,
since he didn't sell to the operators.
No,
he would operate them himself.
No, and that's why Mills had to steal it. Because
they couldn't get their hands from one of their
exactly, and they wanted to copy, and the copying continued for many years. I mean, they all did that stuff. Charlie was just a genius.
Speaking of that, looking at some of the mechanisms, it looked like there was kind of a war on slugs, and it was really seemed to be an escalation of arms.
Yeah.
So can you speak a little bit about the different mechanisms that they use to try and trap slugs and prevent people from using them?
Yeah, sure. The escalators are the top part of the machine where the coin is accepted, and you're right. Back then the U.S. was much more industrialized than it was today, so it wasn't very hard for somebody who worked in a machine shop to go create some stampings and then to try and put them in the slot machine to play for free and potentially to win some money. So there was different mechanisms within there, like there's a magnet in there. Someone used a steel or iron slug, then it would get caught by the magnet. If a lot of them, because they were stampings, had a hole in the center of them. So it would, if it was a slug or a token, you could put the token in, but it wouldn't pay out in the coin. So there's a different way of doing it that way. If it wasn't the right size, it wouldn't go down the track, wouldn't be held right. So as each of the different manufacturers had different ways of doing it. And another thing, of course, he did was the visual side of it, where there'd be a big glass window. Initially, there's one called goosenecks that only accepted one coin at a time. You can only see one coin at a time. And then later, the escalators, like Mills and Jennings came up with, you could see the last 4 coins played. And so there was a window there, a glass window, that was there so that the barkeep or whoever was running the machines could see if somebody had put a slug or something there that didn't look like a coin. And if you did that, well, God help you, because this was not exactly, these places were not exactly legal. So you might get like a tire iron or a baseball bat or whatever on your head. So you kind of did that at your own peril, in all honesty. So, not to mention speakeasies and stuff where you might get shot. But in the 20s and early 30s, till Prohibition was outlawed in 33. So, it was more as much a visual thing or a magnet, or it had a hole in it, then the mechanism, the escalators could tell that. So it was a way of keeping the people from ripping you off, which was kind of an irony, because the early slot machines, and I mean by early, even up through the 60s there really, unlike the gaming commissions of today where slot machines are legal in certain states, and there's a certain minimum statistical average of you winning, like I think New Jersey, when I'd lived in Pennsylvania when New Jersey opened up Atlantic City, I think it was like 82% or something like that, was the minimum you could win statistically. Well, back then, those slot machines, there was no gaming commission. They would often pay out 60 to 70%. And in fact, pretty much, I think every single game slot machine that I bought in the 80s and even the 90s, the old mechanical ones, had been rigged by the operator. And what I mean by that is, you see the 3 reels there with the fruit symbols on it. They're connected to a metal disc, each of those reels. 3 reels, 3 discs. And the disc has holes in it, and that's how the payout fingers determine if you're going to win or not. every one of those machines, I think, bar none, that was not restored, had plugs on those discs for at least one or two of the combinations. So you'd have like a bell or a bar or a cherry or an orange. Well, what they did is the operators, well, as I said, were rather unsavory characters and usually connected with organized crime or petty crime themselves, would get I don't know how, I guess they made some kind of copy. This is long before regular copy machines were out there, where they'd get a reel strip, what the symbols are on. They'd cut up another reel strip, and they would put a lemon over that bar, cherry, orange, whatever. And so you didn't realize when you were hitting a lemon, you really weren't hitting a lemon. You were really hitting an orange or a cherry, and you should have gotten a payout. But the operators rigged all the machines. So you started off with a 60 to 70% payout, sometimes 75%, but then they would reduce it themselves post original equipment manufacturer, post manufacturer kind of ripping off the customer there. So the odds weren't very good, is my point. On that stuff. So
gotcha.
I think every one of them was like that, because and some of these things I don't even think about it. Now that we're talking about this stuff, I've forgotten some of these things just as I've restored the machines over the last 30 years. Oh, my dog here's somebody out there trying to attack, my 7-pound fierce monster. But pretty much every one of those games was set up like that. It was amazing. I mean, I don't think there was one that was on the level. I don't think there was one. So the operators were. And as a matter of fact, there's one guy who lives over in northern Kentucky, and I still know him. He's about 90 years old. He was a slot machine mechanic for one of those casino/restaurants. So it was a little bit higher class than a basic speakeasy in the 1940s and 50s. He's still alive. I just spoke to him a couple months ago. And he's kind of mellowed over the years. He was always kind of a gruff guy. He's mellowed over the years. But he tells all kinds of stories like that, and the criminals that he dealt with. And here in the Newport, Kentucky area, it was a Detroit mob that actually ran the games here. It was Detroit or Cleveland, one of the two. I can't remember now. It's been documented, and they actually have what they call gangster tours here in northern Kentucky area. You can visit where some of the casinos were and where some of the speakeasies were, and so on and so forth. But it was one of the organized crime groups that actually ran it. It was either Cleveland or Detroit. I think it was Detroit. And so this guy from northern Kentucky, is still alive. He was a slot machine mechanic there, and so would work on the machines and keep them running, and he could tell you stories about this person got shot, or that person tried to put a slug in there and got slapped side of the head, and all kinds of crazy stuff. So you kind of enter these restaurant/casino bars at your own risk. The police apparently kind of turned a blind eye to it, so you could draw your own inferences from that. There's been a number of books written about the gambling in this area that are available locally that talk about all that. So it's colorful.
That's some fascinating stuff, actually. I mean, it's pretty impressive that this whole kind of cottage industry grew up, and it wasn't exactly on the level.
No. I mean, I think Charlie Faye's was. His machines were, but once everybody and the original equipment manufacturers, I mean, they started off with bad odds, but they were, well, except for one of them, all those machines were on the level once the 1930s came around. But see, before the 1930s, there was that problem of you saw 20 symbols, but you could only hit 10 of them. That was kind of a cheating device that all the manufacturers did. But once the early 30s, like 1933 or so time frame came around, they went to 20 symbol, 20 stop machines, so you could actually hit every symbol you saw. And the manufacturers, they had bad odds, but they were pretty much on the level, as much as you could be for illegal gambling devices. It was the operators that were cheating after that. There was only one machine made, which I have in my basement, the Mills Futurity, which was actually a cheating slot machine that was early 30s. Where there's two cams on the arms that hold those three reels, and they pivot between two positions. And on I think it's the 6th and the 10th. The concept of that machine is if you put 10 coins in, and then you didn't hit a winner in those 10 coins, 10 handle pulls of the one-armed bandit, you get your altered 10 coins back. Well, that sounds like a pretty good deal. Well, it would have been, but this was the only cheating slot machine that came out after the early 30s. And what it worked was that there was two cams on it, and so you had two positions. And when you hit the 6th and 10th position of your 10 coins, there was a very high probability that you were going to get a 2-cherry combination, which paid out a couple of coins, 2 coins.
And that happened to me when I played it.
Yes, that's right. And so because I got one of those in the basement. Let's see, all the early ones had 20 symbols, 10 stops. So that in a sense was cheating. But after the early 30s, the manufacturers kind of came clean, except for that one machine. And I got one of them in the basement. It's a futurity machine. It's a pretty complicated machine. But I bought it about I don't know, 15 years ago, something like that. But it's a neat machine. Once again, kind of a gimmick machine. Unusual machine. That's kind of like what I like to collect, whether it's a bonus machine I was describing earlier, or that futurity machine, or the little Duke that has 3 discs instead of 3 concentric discs instead of 3 reels, stuff like that.
Yeah, that word futurity holds great meaning to bingo pinball aficionados.
Oh yeah, I've heard of it. That's right.
So,
yeah, well, some of these things get recycled, and things get recycled.
Right. That's right. That holdover, that carryover feature is always fascinating to me from any kind of coin-operated machine. And that's why the coin escalators are pretty fascinating to me, too, to jump back.
Mm-hmm.
So on the mill side, they have the escalator where it's just like on a chain and it carries across. But there's another type of machine that you have, the roll-a-top.
Oh, yeah.
Where the coins are in a circle.
Yes.
And you had mentioned to me while I was up there that that's actually a much more reliable mechanism.
Yeah, it's made by Watling. Tom Watling started out in the carnival business, carny man. So he was given to great exaggerations and such. And his machine, the escalator is pretty reliable. That roller top, because it does go around a circle before it goes down into the coin tube. Now, the rest of his machine, now I've got a really good one. A number of people will complain about the machines. They're beautiful machines. They have symbols of coins on the front, either U.S. coins or later just antique coins and such, or ancient coins. But some of the people will say, well, Tom Watling tried to eliminate as many parts as possible to save money and to streamline the machine. And as a result, I've read over the years that a lot of those machines don't play that well. The escalator might that takes care of the coin, but what you got into the mechanism used to jam a lot. Now, I've not had any problems like that. That's one of my most reliable machines. And they're beautiful machines, and they made a fair number of them. But initially, they made them with a U.S. coin front, and they're just stylized like a U.S. coin. And when you wouldn't think it was a real coin, but like the Washington quarter or stuff like that. But the U.S. government apparently hassled Tom Watling about putting a very vague representation of a U.S. coin on there, and that's when he went to the antique and ancient coins and foreign coins. I've got a U.S. coin front, as it's called. I'm a coin collector too, so for me it has some meaning. But yeah, it's kind of funny. I mean, here the U.S. government's complaining to this guy and his gambling devices anyway, which weren't really legal. So it's kind of a double jeopardy, I guess, in a sense. But but yeah, that's why you'll see U.S. coin fronts and then foreign coin fronts on the Watling roll-a-top, and that was actually initially called a roll-a-tour for the escalator, but he had to change it to roll-a-top because apparently there was one of the early refrigerators was called a roll-a-tour. And so that company sued him. They sued him for it, and he said, "Oh boy, I can't win for losing here." First, the government comes after me and that, so he ended up changing the name. The early ones of those machines are called roll-a-tours. Okay. And they didn't make them very long, and then they just cut off the bottom part of the R and it became roll-a-top. So that's kind of an interesting aside. And I've seen the roll-a-tours out there. There aren't many of them out there, but whatever refrigerator company made it definitely gave him a hard time. Yeah. So. Didn't work out for him in that sense.
But that is a beautiful casting that it's got. It's got kind of the horn of plenty that goes up around the escalator, and it's dumping out the coins. And so that's another interesting thing, just as far as payouts go. For each of the manufacturers, did they have kind of a different sound engineered for the payouts? They're all very musical, of course, to draw your attention. But is there much of a difference in how that mechanism works between the manufacturers, or is that another that was just straight up copied?
the payout mechanism, except for the electromechanical console machines of the 30s and 40s, they pretty much ran. They were pretty much all the same. Okay, they were pretty much all the same. The electromechanical machines were different. They used coin slicers. They'd have like 2 tubes, and it would literally slice out the coins. I've got a couple of those in the basement too, several, like 3 of them. But long before the payout hoppers of the 1960s came out. The Bally Money Honey machines, they're like the machines of today, which was really just when the Bally Money Honey payout hoppers came out. That was just a coin counter set with a DC or AC motor, I'm not sure which, just to pay out in reverse. That's where they came up with the idea. Bally came up with the idea on that. But yeah, most of the mechanical machines, you'll see some. There's a few out there, a few outliers that pay out differently. Mm-hmm. But most of them pay out the same with coin slides. They'll have what they call slides at the bottom there and the front of the machine, and they're the thickness of the coins you want to pay out. So they work cumulatively. So if you get 2 cherries, the bottom one will be the thickness. The bottom payout slide will be the thickness of 2 coins. Or if you get 2 cherries and a bell, or in some cases even a lemon or a bar, you might get paid 3 or 5 coins, something like that, 5 coins. And so there'll be 2 slides, and they'll both slide back and pay out. So there'll be a slide of thickness of 2 coins and another one slide of thickness of 3 coins, pay out 5. And if you get 3 oranges, there'll be 10. There'll be 10 coins pay out. Where you get those 2 prior ones, those 2 slides, and another slide that's the thickness of 5 coins. So you pay out cumulatively. All 4 slides will slide back, and it's 10 coins. So they all work pretty much the same. Okay. There's a few outliers, but not too many.
And
not too many.
How common is it to see, or is this even possible, to convert denominations? So change from a nickel to a quarter, say. Was that common, or did that happen?
Yeah, that did, actually. There's some machines you couldn't do that for, but for most of the machines, the basic mechanism was the same for the penny, nickel, dime, quarter. It's when you go to 50 cent or dollar machines that the mechanisms, because to handle the bigger coins, were different. So it's really not that difficult to do. You got to buy the parts, and you got to be able to get the slides, which are no longer around. It's all antiques for companies that are out of business. But if you can get the slides, payout slides, and a different coin tube, mm-hmm. that was basically the only difference. The biggest problem, back then it wasn't hard to do. Now it's harder because, like I said, the companies are out of business. So if you want to convert something, for example, most coins were nickels until at least after World War II, because of the Depression and the deflation that happened in the Great Depression. A quarter was like the quarter. A nickel was like the quarter of today, and a number of machines were converted to quarter after World War II. They went to higher stakes, mm-hmm. Or even $half and silver dollar machines. But you didn't see too many of them. Most of the machines of the teens, 20s, 30s, at least until after World War II, and even after World War II, most of them were still nickel. But most of the machines were nickel machines. But you can convert them, except, like I said, the 50 cent or dollar ones. Those usually didn't work as well because that was different. There was a number of things that were different. And the escalator, too. Some of the parts of the escalator would be different, but even the escalators themselves would be different for the larger coins. Mm-hmm. So it made it more difficult.
But between a nickel and a quarter, you could reuse the same mechanism? Okay.
Yep. Different coin tube, different slides, and a couple parts of the escalator that hold the coin, because the diameter of the coin would be different, would be changed. But other than that, no, they're pretty much the same.
Okay. And you wouldn't have to drill out the entry or anything like that?
It depended. Usually the entries were such that they might have like a little bit of a spacer or whatever that would allow a smaller coin to go in the first place, and just take that out. You might not drill it out, but you might have to put a different piece in there or something for a different, almost like a spacing device that held the coin.
Okay. Yeah.
So not too different. Not too different.
So on a machine like, is this a Bluebell, the one with the cherry on the front?
Bursting cherry.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
It's a bursting cherry.
Aptly named.
Yeah, and a lot of those, supposedly back in the 30s and even 40s, if you want to, stuff that's been in the books and magazines and such, it was that some of the local police might be on the take, and so they could look through the window and they could see a symbol there, whether it was a bursting cherry or an Indian head for the Jennings machines or whatever. Mm-hmm. And if they were getting paid off by whoever that was running those machines, they knew to let those machines alone because they could recognize the cherry or the Indian head or whatever. That was supposedly part of the reason for putting such distinctive symbols in the front aluminum castings of these machines.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at a picture of your machine in particular and the coin entry for that. And up there, as part of the casting, it's got 5 cents on a plate.
Yeah, that's just a little button. That's got a little screw in the back of it, and that just comes right out, and you can penny, nickel, dime, quarter, whatever. That's easy. That's a little piece of metal that comes out, or aluminum piece of metal. Yeah, actually, I just walked downstairs and I'm looking at it right now. So yeah, that would not be a big deal.
Well, as you can tell, I know absolutely nothing, but I was curious there.
No, it's a very good question. It's a very good question. But that's just a little button that comes out of there. Yeah, some of them, like the Jennings machine that's right next to it, you'd have to have a slightly different piece on the top because it's actually part of a casting. It's not just a button. It's part of the coin entry. So you might have to have a different coin head that would fit into the escalator to make it work. So it just depends on the machine. It really depends on the machine. But the buttons themselves, for at least the Mills machines, were pretty easily replaced in most cases, at least in the 1930s.
Excellent. So, jackpot mechanisms. How do those work, and how do they differ from the normal payout slides?
Yeah, and jackpots actually were in those original 1900 or thereabouts floor machines. They actually came with jackpots. Some of them did, not very many. That's where the jackpot actually originated, even before the three-wheel machine came about. But your jackpots work such that you'll have all the slides will pay out. And so it's like 20 coins in most cases. And then there'll be a part on the main mechanism that will trip the jackpot and will dump this coin in there. And it's coins just through the escalator mechanism will go into the jackpot over time. And so that's how the jackpots are initially fed and filled. It's just from normal play, and it adds some complexity to the machine, of course, to do that. But there'll be a jackpot, and actually a backup jackpot, a reserve jackpot right above it that will dump on the next play after you hit a jackpot, which probably wasn't necessary because they didn't hit jackpots very often for these things. They didn't have great odds. So, but it would just fill. So it's just like there'd be spacers in there, and it's just a compartment that held X number of coins. So there'd be a range of coins, and there's actually a way to adjust that in a number of the machines to reduce how many coins it would hold.
Huh. Okay.
And you can see it, especially in the pace machine. You just literally, it's like a wing nut. You just tighten it up or whatever, and it could. Not all the machines had that adjustment, but because it was kind of crude. But it would limit how many coins would go in there. Usually, like in the Mills machines and most of the other machines, there was just a compartment, and it would fill up, and you really couldn't change the number of coins in there. But some of them, like Pace, who was another one of the guys that made slot machines. And I think he worked for Mills at one point. A lot of these guys worked for each other early in their careers. But that's how it's just a compartment, and it just fills up from the escalator. Like every fifth coin would go into the jackpot, or every third coin, or then it would back up, and then anything beyond that would just go either into the coin tube, which is the thing that fills up first, or into the cash box.
Okay, that was my next question, is what happens when that fills up? So
goes in the cash box.
Gotcha.
Initially, the coin tube fills up, and like some of the machines, like every fifth coin, like on the Pace machine, which also has a rotary escalator, not as big as the roller top, but every sixth coin, I think, goes into the jackpot, because there's like a little detent in it that's not blocked and allows the coins to go in. So initially, the coin tube fills up, except for maybe one out of every X number of coins, and then it'll go in the jackpot, and when that fills up, the little chute that goes in the jackpot fills up, then it just defaults with a little a little lever there that would allow it to go, it would force it to go into the cash box, which is where most of the coins ended up, and the operators made a lot of money on this stuff.
Well, that's the whole idea, isn't it?
That's absolutely capitalism at its best, I guess you could say.
So let's shift topics a little bit and talk about trade stimulators. You've got a fantastic collection of some pretty varied trade stimulators, and I just wanted to take a minute and talk about some of the ones that are in your collection and some of their unique features. So one of the first ones that I came to, I'm looking at some photos that I took while I was up there, is one that has symbols of cigarette packs on it.
Yep, looking at it right now. The ginger, Groshen ginger. Yep, absolutely. And what they used to do is the trade stimulators, of course, were similar, although they're much simpler mechanisms. And what they would do is they would they would vend candy or cigarettes, and they'd be paid out over the counter. And often they'd give a little gumball with it, or they'd give you a token or something along those lines that would come out. But they were paid out over the counter. They were not. The machine usually didn't pay it out. Like I said, this Groshen Ginger you're mentioning did have a token. If you hit 3 cigarette packs of the same color and type in a row, it would vend a token that's about the size of a quarter, and that's what you would take to the barkeep, and then get paid off in your cigarettes. Is what you do. I used to have more trade stimulators. I actually sold a couple when I was in Europe, and bought some slot machines instead. So I used to have 2 or 3 other ones than I do now.
Wow.
So I don't have too many trade stimulators left. Yeah, the slot machines went for, except for the UK, most of the slot machines went for a lot more money in Europe when I lived there. So there weren't as many of them around. So I got to meet some of the collectors in the Netherlands and Denmark and France and such when I lived in Belgium, because they were all relatively close in size. So I got to be friends with some of these guys, and I've lost touch with most of them because it's been 20 years since I lived in Europe. But I had more trade simulators then than I do now, because I just think the slot machines, although a lot more complicated, are more interesting.
Right.
But they're neat. They're pretty neat all the way around.
Is the mechanism similar though? Like especially on this one, you've got 3 reels and they spin and stop. Is it mechanically kind of similar, or?
It's similar, but it's a lot simpler.
Okay.
It doesn't have the anti-cheat devices, it's a pretty simple mechanism.
Okay.
Because it was meant to go on a bar top, and the barkeep would be right there in most cases.
Watching you do it.
So it's a much, much simpler mechanism. Pretty easy to fix in most cases.
Well, I will say it only took about 100 pennies for me to get that token. So.
And I didn't even pay you out in cigarettes.
I know. I'm still waiting. Still waiting.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Boy, am I a bad host or what?
So what's interesting to me is the fact that printed right on the front of the machine, it says that you redeem the token for 1 up to 10 packs of cigarettes, which is quite a wide variety.
Yeah, and that would depend on the token that you had there. See, if the token had had a 2 on it, and I don't have most of the original tokens, but if it had a 1 or 2 or 5 or 10, then that's how many packs of cigarettes you'd get.
Gotcha.
Or they might just pay out in real money. I mean, just like some of the slot machines would pay out in tokens.
Mm-hmm.
You'd take it to the barkeep, they'd give you real money for it.
Right.
So it just was another way of gambling, because there was different ways to get around the gambling problems that the slot machine manufacturers would do. Like there's one machine I have that vends mints, breath mints and such, and that made it a vending machine. It wasn't a slot machine, of course. It was a vending machine.
Right.
Yeah, sure it was.
You're really buying mints. You're not actually gambling.
Exactly. Or it would have a future pay, like that same one I have that has the mints in the front is a future pay. So it would your winnings go on a little shelf that just moves forward and back with every play. So if you hit 2 cherries in a bar, instead of getting 2 coins, you wouldn't get it on that play. You had to put another nickel in, and then a little shelf would move back like it did on every play, and then your 2 coins would drop out. So therefore, you knew if you were going to win and lose, because you didn't get paid out till the next play. So that made it not gambling. And the only way it made it not gambling was that they paid off some of the judges that would rule on these things. So let's say it wasn't just the police that got in on it; it was the judges too. So nobody believed these things were truly not gambling machines, but it was a way of giving some legal cover to the judges and or the police of not doing that. So they've come up with all kinds of creative stuff over the years of trying to get around the gambling rules.
Mm-hmm.
And keeping these things running as long as they could. And eventually, post-World War II, everybody got religion and felt bad and thought we ought to live in a moral society, and that's when the slot machines started to go away. And except for Nevada, and I guess there was a few counties in Maryland which ran machines up to the late 60s. It was county by county. Most of the places went dark after the 1950s, at least above board. Places in the open. There was stuff in the back rooms, and like Newport, Kentucky, continued to do it, but they gradually all went dark then in the 50s and 60s. And by 1970, when the last of the Maryland counties was no longer running, because one of my cousins lives in Baltimore, and he remembers. He's about 10 years older than me. He remembers the slot machines running there until the late 60s. He remembers them being there, and eventually, about like 1970, they shut them down. So it was just Nevada until Atlantic City opened up then in 1976, and now, of course, we got a whole bunch of places in the U.S. that have gambling, casinos, and such.
So
a lot of games played over the years to call them, so they wouldn't be called gambling.
Right. Another interesting one that you've got is that 21 machine, the blackjack trade simulator.
Okay.
What's the name of that one?
Oh, yeah. That's one of the ones I kept. That's right. That's by Groshin also. I think it's...
Is it called 21?
21 Vendor.
Oh, there you go.
21 Vendor. Yeah, it's... I think that was Groshin that made this one, too. And that's... you play blackjack on it is really what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's... once again, the odds are not exactly in your favor on this one.
I don't know what you mean.
You get a couple of cards there, and then there's 3 more windows you push down with a lever, and almost every one of the ones you push down with a lever is a 10 card or a face card, so that you end up busting almost every time. So it also vended a gumball, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Just look at this thing right now. Yeah, gum down here in my game room.
And for that one, you would show the bartender if you had 21.
Yeah, you would, and then they'd pay you out points, meaning money.
Right.
So there's a lot of stuff like that went around over the years. Just a lot of stuff that was questionable in terms of legality. But hey,
that's all pretty fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's kind of neat. That's why I think it interests me, just the gambling motif and concepts that go into it. I mean, really, I think it's a pinball on a day-to-day basis is more fun to play. The history of these and the gambling that went into them and the mechanisms that went into them and all that. And some of the games they played with the anti-cheat scenarios they came up with are just all very amusing. I just really was interested in the history of them. So I love history, and so it was kind of a natural for me to get into some of this stuff.
I feel the exact same way about the bingos, and honestly, you've turned me on quite a bit to the slot machines, and I think we talked, and I think like me, you're not much of a gambler yourself.
No.
So it really is just a fascination with the history of the games themselves.
And the mechanicals that go into it, and they're just fun to play. I was when my daughter was. She's in college now, but when she was in junior high and grade school and all that, she played soccer and swimming and cross country and track. And we'd have her teams down here for parties, whether they were playing the pinball machines or the slot machines or playing the jukebox or the penny scale, lollipop scale, stuff like that. They'd have a blast, or the player piano, whatever. They'd have a blast playing this stuff. It was just fun, and I provided all the money and stuff like that. So they would have fun doing it. So it was the camaraderie that came along with it. We just had a blast doing that stuff. Yeah, I'm not a gambler at all. I really don't go to casinos very often. Don't really enjoy it because, I mean, I know the odds. I mean, it's very poor odds. I mean, if you want to go there for entertainment, that's great.
Yeah.
Say I'm going to drop $20 or $50 and have fun. Great, no problem. But no one should go there thinking they're going to win. They're going to win a paycheck or something like that.
Right.
And so because I provide the money here, it makes it a lot of fun for the kids that come here, and then they just play with my coins. And actually, that reminds me of one more story. I'll bore you with is one of my friends who I worked with for years at Procter & Gamble, and he just retired from there in finance. When his sons were young, his second son, the son was maybe 4 years old, probably 4. And he came down to see my basement in the game room, and we played some of the games. And, of course, his dad had to help him because he couldn't really pull down the big handles of the slot machine and such. And let's see what his name was. Michael. It was Michael. And he said so Michael had a fun time with the games, and Michael was going to bring some souvenirs home with him in the form of my coins. It's like, I didn't really care. It's like, yeah, fine. There's a bunch of nickels and stuff. So every time Michael was about 4 years old, maybe 5, would walk, Michael would jingle as he was walking, just getting ready to leave. And his dad, Jack, said, "Now, Michael, you didn't take any of Mr. Sal's coins with you, did you?" And he said, "Oh, no, Dad, I didn't take any." And I'm just cracking up. I'm trying to keep him just busting out laughing and falling on the floor. And I wish I'd had my camcorder with me, but we were in the basement of the game room, and I didn't. It was like something out of a cartoon. He didn't hurt him. He literally picked him up by his feet carefully. Jack was a tall guy, he's a couple of inches taller than me. Picked up Michael and shook him, and all these coins fell out of his pocket. And I just about lost it. I was laughing so hard. It was just like something you see in a cartoon. But it was in real life, and it happened in my basement. And I'm just standing in all these coins fell out of Michael's pockets that he had punched in. And I didn't care if he's going to take them home. He probably had dollars of coins. Who cares? But it was hilarious. It was just hilarious. And Michael's a fine, upstanding kid now. He's a young man. He's out of college. He's actually working for one of the accounting firms, so he turned out fine. But at the time, it was pretty funny. Pretty funny to see this happen.
So how often did those kind of shakedowns happen?
That was the only time that ever happened. I mean, if other people took coins, beats me. I guess they took them home. I mean, this way it's just not gambling if it's my coins they're playing with. I mean, people have asked me for some of the English pennies. 2 of my machines came out of Europe when I lived there, and they're U.S. machines, but for English penny, which is the same size as a $50. And people would ask for a sample, would like to take an English penny home. And I'd get one of the older ones or something that wasn't playing well anyway and say, here you go. I'd give away some English pennies, but if other people have taken them, they've taken them. I don't know. Beats me. I'm not exactly, wondering where my next hamburger's coming from because people have taken all my coins and I'm bankrupt or broke.
Taking all your nickels.
Exactly. It's mostly nickel, I guess, because most of them are nickel machines. That was the quarter of the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and pretty much even into the 50s. I mean, really, even quarter machines got popular then more in the 60s. And there's still a lot of nickel machines out there, for that were made in the 60s and 70s, electromechanical ones. So, but yeah, so if I've been ripped off, I don't know, and I don't care. That's fine.
That's good. So I was curious, how do you feel about the bingos? Of course, you've been over to Jeffrey's house and played his amazing bingos, and you've played Robert Madel's bingos now. Yeah. So you've had a good initiation.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the playability and the gambling aspect of the bingos versus, say, the slot machines?
Well, I mean, they're gambling too. They're more sophisticated. You really have to use some strategy in some of them. They're neat. I mean, I'm not an accomplished bingo player. I mean, Bob would say, hey, you probably want to go with this one, that one. I just stop and think about it. Okay, yeah, I got to line these 3 up, and I can move this magic screen around if I do that and this. But I think they're pretty neat. I mean, they're not as overt gambling. And I wasn't even aware they existed. I think apparently, Jeffrey's from New Jersey. Apparently, they were really big in New Jersey. I wasn't aware of bingos. I mean, I'm sure I saw them. But I wasn't aware of bingos like I was other pinball machines going up, so I wasn't even aware what was going on until I really just got to know Jeffrey and saw the different games he had. Now that I think about it, I actually did see some bingo games that were still running because you have casinos in Europe when we lived there. So they had bingos over there. Now that I think about it, I haven't thought about that for years. But I did see some bingo games, but at the time, I thought, that's kind of a weird-looking machine. Where's the flippers and stuff like that? But I wasn't playing so much, the coin-op games over there. So, but they had bingos over there, too. But I think they're neat. It's not as overt of a gambling. You really do need to put some thought into it in terms of, here, what's the odds if I put X number of coins in or use up X number of replays, or the odds I'm going to get, the features or the odds that I want, or an extra ball if you've used up all your balls and you're close to a winner. So there's definitely more strategy involved, and it's much more of a cerebral game, I think, than a slot machine. A slot machine, especially these old ones, are pretty much mindless. I mean, you put a coin in, you pull a handle and stuff like that. Now the slot machines, now that I think about it, in the UK, when we lived over there in Belgium for 2 years, I went over to the UK a lot for business and then also for vacation, and I actually got to know some of the slot machine people. Their slot machines back then were more sophisticated. They were really, you'd have different selections and stuff like that, so they played, well, not like a bingo, but you had different options you could play on them, so they were more sophisticated slot machines that were more cerebral and were more of a strategy type of game, as opposed to the slot machines now, which are even now, I guess, other than putting in additional coins or something, you're basically putting in a coin, pulling the handle, and hoping the one-armed bandit doesn't rob you.
Right.
So, hence the term one-armed bandit, of course. But and you've probably seen them. They've got these at the Chicagoland shows, and have had them for a number of years. There actually have been character figures, like Wild West Cowboys and stuff like that have a slot machine as the core, and then they built the body around it. They're kind of neat. They have them up in Chicago. There was an artist, a carving artist. I can't think of his name, but he's in some of the slot machine books, and he actually built some of them for the casinos in the 40s, I think it was.
Huh.
Yeah, 1940s. They're characters. So, and some of the early ones he did. I think it was Frank. I can't think of his last name now, but whatever. Some of the early ones were of a cowboy with like a bandit with a kerchief across half his face, like a one-armed bandit.
Right.
And so, so just have the slot machine be the hand, and it would literally have just one arm and then the handle of the slot machine. Where the slot machine handle would be, they would build a wooden, almost like a prosthetic around the slot machine handle, and you pull it down. It might be a gun or whatever, carved out of wood. Can't think of the guy's name. Frank something or other, but he was a famous wooden carving artist. He did it and those go for big money, the original ones that he did. And there's been a number of copies over the years, but they look like one-armed bandits, or they'd have other characters too. They have an Indian chief or whatever that would be built around a slot machine, and they always have them at that Chicagoland show. Huh. So true one-armed bandits. Kind of fun.
Well, I've got another question or another oddity from your game room, and
okay.
I wanted to know how common these were, and if this was actually factory or if someone had replaced the reels. You've got a fortune-telling slot machine.
Oh yeah.
Now is that a trade stimulator, or is that just purely novelty?
No, that was that's the Little Duke. That's the 3 concentric discs. They made them for other machines too.
Okay.
That was another one of the games that was played by the manufacturers, and when the judges were paid off, because nobody would believe this either.
Right.
That made it. You were not buying. You were not gambling. You were getting your fortune told with that. So no one obviously would believe that unless you were a fool. But they paid off the judges. Then the judges said, "Well, this is obvious. It's telling your fortune. You can see this on the thing." Judgment paid off. And let's say before you had the FBI and all this other stuff, before the federal agencies really came into play, and much less the Johnson Act of 1951 or all that. A lot of smaller jurisdictions, and so it was much easier to pay off a judge, and that's why the fortune-telling reels are on there. Just like the Minders or the Future Pay or that other stuff, they're just games
Gotcha.
that are being played. With the payoff has really got you out of the gambling, not the silly excuse of a fortune-telling reel. But good question, very good question. And a lot of the machines had that. You'd see that stuff.
And so that came from the factory that way?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Or the operator could order replacement reels if they thought the judge was going to get paid off or something like that. And the original ones, the reason they're fruit symbols is because Charlie Fay didn't have fruit symbols. He had like diamonds and stars and stuff like that. The original ones would bend sticks of gum or gumballs and stuff like that, and that was part of the reason they used the fruit symbols.
Oh, okay.
Like, well, this is a fruit symbol machine. This is a vending machine. And if you had cherry gum or orange gum or whatever, the original ones that Charlie Fay had, if you look in that book, for the Liberty Bell were stars and things like that, moons and so on and so forth. So that came later. And then, it was like 1910, Mills came out with that idea with the vending. There was even a rock group in the 60s, what's it called then? 1910 fruit gum machine or company, something like that. That was, I can't remember the exact name of the rock group. It wasn't a real big rock group. They had a couple of hits in the 60s. They got that from the Mills machine. They named it. 1910 Fruit Gum Company or something like that. If you Google it, you can find it. It was a 1960s group, and not a big one, but they got that from a Mills machine that I guess one of the kids that was in the band, his dad had it in the basement or something, wherever he saw it. So it came from because the original ones were patented by Mills. Yeah, I'm looking at one right now, copyright 1910 Mills Novelty Company, the one that has the vending machine and the Future Pay.
Gotcha.
Mills copyrighted, and it was because they were vending gum and or gumballs of fruit variety to try and get around the gambling, which was, once again, ridiculous. No one would believe that.
That's pretty cute. I will say that I was told I would meet a beautiful grass widow. And I had to look up what that meant. Because
I don't even remember what it means. I mean, maybe I looked it up once, but I have no idea.
Well, I found out it's a woman who is attached and is unescorted. So, yes, perhaps a married woman whose husband is at work or elsewhere. So.
Well, that's the 1930s. That was a Depression era machine. I'm looking at it right now, the Little Duke penny machine. Almost all of them were pennies because in the Depression people didn't have a whole lot of money. But yeah, that was the penny machine. So yeah, the fortune telling reel strips are pretty funny, and you can still buy them. I mean. Tom Kroll passed away. Bernie Burton, or his son, Bernie passed away too. Dave Burton, his son, sells the reel strips, and there's a few other dealers in the U.S. who still. You can still get parts, most of the original ones. Some like the reel strips are reproductions, but with color photocopies now you can kind of make your own if you have one to base it from. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you can still get the fortune telling strips, stuff like that.
And are parts fairly common for all types of machines? Or are there some where parts are really scarce?
No, the Mills machines are easy to get parts for in most cases, except for some of the more unusual slides, like a penny slide you don't see as much of. But you get to some of the other, Mills made the most of them, and Jennings was probably second. But once you get beyond that, it's harder to get parts for Watling or Kale or Pace. I mean, there's some out there, and it just depends on the part.
Fair enough.
It can be difficult.
That was a broad question.
Yeah.
So you've written a number of articles, from my understanding, and I read one of them in Gameroom Magazine about the Mills vest pocket.
Oh, yeah.
And was that in the new Gameroom?
Yeah, it was the one that came out in was it December?
Okay.
There's another one. I just wrote another one about the arcade target gun from the Valley's late 1950s, the Halloween theme, the spook gun. I just wrote an article for them too, and that one I think it's coming out in the next few weeks. Right? I sent an article, and I think she said it was going to be in there. I think Meredith said it was going to be in there. So yeah. I've written a couple of them, and I've written for the COCA magazine. I didn't write any last year for them, but I get one published a year. It seems like the last 5, 6, 7 years.
Excellent.
So yeah, it makes it fun. Because just different games I've restored, or whether sometimes they're not even my game. Sometimes it was a customer's game. After I fixed all mine, I'd find Jeff would tell me about this guy when his game fixed. I'd fix it and I'd write about it and such. So most of them have been my games, but some of them have been people I've bought machines and bought and sold from or restored for.
Well, I'd highly encourage listeners to go look up those articles because they're very well written and your documentation is great as well.
Thanks.
So,
Thanks.
As far as the Mills vest pocket goes, you showed me that while I was there. Mm-hmm. What would you say is the defining feature of that game?
It's got a rather unusual payout because it's such a small machine. It's a little cube. It looks like a trade stimulator, but it's a full payout slot machine except it doesn't have a jackpot. But it pays out up to 20 coins, and it's got a kind of an unusual slide mechanism that does the payouts, and it's got a normal like coin acceptance like you'd see in a gum vending machine or something like that. You push in the slide so it accepts a coin, and when you do that, that's what makes it actually work. That's what actually spins the reels. It's a rather unusual machine. They started making them in the late 30s, and they made them up through the 50s, and then Sega Japan actually copied it. Actually, the Sega machines work better. The original Mills, I made a couple of adjustments on mine because they have a tendency to jam, and so I made a couple of adjustments on mine so mine almost never jams anymore. But they were an ingenious idea, but very, very small machine, and there's actually a little flap on it on the top there that someone might think it's a radio or something like that. You just put the flap over, and you can't see the 3 reels.
Of course, it accepts coins, which
yeah, accepts coins. So they might say, "Oh, that's a radio or something like that," or it's a whatever. But yeah, but it was the vest pocket. The concept was it was so easy you could slip it in your vest pocket. Was what the marketing is that Mills came out with. But essentially, the barkeep, if you saw a policeman come in, it wasn't on the take, he would grab it and slip it underneath the bar because it was very easily picked up. It's like 20 pounds, if that. And so, but it's a neat little machine. So if you make a few adjustments on it, then it won't jam, and that really makes it kind of fun to do. It makes it pretty neat.
There's a couple for sale here locally that are missing some parts. How difficult are those to source? That's
a problem. I mean, mine was the slides on it, and I think it was the way because I wrote about that I think in the article where the slides were. That was like really one big slide, had a tendency to rub up against the casting, the main frame there, and jam and then break. And so I don't know if anybody really makes the slides for it. So yeah, if you have to be careful if you buy a machine like that, you want to make sure it's complete, because it's the slide. When I bought mine, the slide had been broken because it had jammed up against the casting and cracked, and the part disappeared. God knows whoever did it, they got rid of the casting. So luckily, was it Mike Connolly? Right before we moved to Europe, I bought it. He had a spare slide for one, which they were really hard to find, and so I was able to replace my missing slide. If it was broken, you could go to a welding shop and have it brazed and welded together because it's the brass piece. But ostensibly that should work. But if you're missing the slide, you're probably out of luck unless you can go to somebody like me, and I want to take my machine apart and go to a machine shop and have it machined. So you'd want to be careful. You'd want to be able to look inside, and then you can look at the pictures I put together in the article, or somebody can contact me and I'll send them pictures of mine. You want to make sure it's all there. Mm-hmm. Because some of the parts you might be able to get around, other ones you can't. Like I said, the slide is the part that used to break. I remember Connolly telling me that 20 years ago. Oh, yeah, slides on a break and you can't get them. And I was very lucky to get one from him at that time, because I had no model to base it from, or to even if I wanted to go to a machine shop to do it. I didn't pay much for my machine. I think I bought it at an auction for like $60, and I was able to get that slide for another 30 or whatever from Connolly. But you want to make sure they're together. Well, it was a mess when I got it, so I had to fix it up. But you don't, because they've sold them here too. There's an auction house that's based in Cincinnati called Everything But the House, which they sell everything in the house except the house itself. So it's an auction service that comes in and sells all the belongings. And they've had a number of slot machines, and they had a Vest Pocket there a month or two ago. But they lost the key for it, and you couldn't go inside it. It's like, well, you have no idea if it's complete or not.
Right.
And so you might only pay $100 for the machine. I think it sold for $150, but like, you have no idea if it's there. Mm-hmm. Good luck. I mean, because taking it apart, like even for me, I would be hesitant to take mine apart and get and take it to a machine shop. I certainly wouldn't send off my slide to someone I didn't know,
right?
And because I never saw it again. So it'd be a major hassle to do that, to take it apart, to get down to that slide to have it reproduced. Gotcha. And I don't even know how much it would cost to reproduce it if you didn't have machine shop capabilities yourself. So you really want to be careful when you get to kind of specialty machines like the Vest Pocket. Even though there's a lot of them out there, you better make sure they're complete, or you might really be disappointed.
Gotcha. So does that same advice go for any of kind of the oddball machines like the Futurity, or any of the more full-size machines, or are those parts easier to source? Yes,
no, you're absolutely. Like the Futurity, nobody makes the Futurity parts. Okay. Nobody. And there's once again, and there's a lot of parts. There's a fair number.
Right.
So unless you were able to make them by hand, or had a machine shop or something like that, had a friend who was a machinist who could make these parts, and then had a model to base it from, good luck. Because there's a number of Futurity machines out there. Apparently, I've been told by the dealers over the years, over the last 30 years, the Futurities have a tendency to jam. Well, even mine. I wrote an article on that for COCA magazine. And the Futurity had a tendency to jam sometimes, and what ended up happening was it wouldn't pay out on the 10th play. And mine did that just from wear and tear. So I actually built a part. I came up with a solution myself. I built another part that compensated for that wear and tear so that it now pays out on the 10th play. But the wear and tear wasn't doing it. It did it when I initially bought it, but remember, it was made like 1937.
Right.
So I bought it in 1991, maybe 91 or 92, something like that, and maybe 93, 94. I don't know, somewhere in that time frame. And it initially paid out on the 10th play if you put in 10 coins, and it didn't pay out, which didn't happen that often. But then it stopped working, so I had to figure out a way to do it. So yeah, Futurity parts, forget it. The bonus mechanisms, the bonus machines. Let's see, Tom Kroll passed away. He had some. I think there's people out there who have them. Mm-hmm. They were being. There was enough of them out there, maybe even reproduction ones. So some of the bonus parts you could get, but the Futurity, forget it. Some of the rarer machines, now you're out of luck. You really want to know what you're buying. And I've got all the magazines going back to the late 70s from the different publishers, whether it was Loose Change or Coin Slot, or went by a variety of different names. So if someone wants to write to me and say, hey, I saw this machine, and there's enough lead time, or whether it's an auction or not, or to somebody's basement, if they can take pictures of it, I can probably get pictures of the machine from one of the articles if I don't have one myself, and say, hey, this is what it should look like. If it's missing this stuff, don't buy it, or realize you're probably never going to get those parts in. So if anybody wants to write to me, that's fine. I'm always glad to help because I'm only trying to promote the hobby.
Okay,
but you really, unless you, and I've made metal parts before, like even for the fixing that futurity, I made that metal part just out of a piece of metal, that wasn't a very big part, or missing your cabinet's cracked. I've actually made pieces of wood to fit into it, things like that. So some of it, if you're pretty handy, you could probably get around. But if you're missing an entire segment of the mechanism of a specialty mech, good luck. You really don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Because people are not going to mail you their mechanism and say, here, we produce this, or and cause, unless they're in your town and they're one of your best friends,
right?
That's not going to happen. I pretty much guarantee it. That will not happen. So you caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. In this case, with that, because and there's even reproduction machines out there. That's the other thing. Slot machines. Mm-hmm. They've been making reproduction slot machines since the late '70s. There's a place in Chicago that have done it. So usually, if the auctioneer is reputable, or if they know, the probably may change hands 2 or 3 times, you may have a reproduction machine. And I can usually tell in the reproductions because the castings they use, whether it's a sand casting or whatever, usually doesn't look as good as the original one. And I can usually tell. But you may have a restored machine that you don't even realize it's a reproduction. So you want to be kind of careful in that too. You want to be going with somebody who's been collecting machines and can compare it to an original and say, this doesn't look quite right. The detail isn't there on the front casting. It just isn't right. The roller-tops are famous for being reproduced, but almost none, I don't think any of the reproductions have that roller-top escalator. They just have a basic escalator. So that's a dead giveaway that it's a reproduction machine.
Wow.
They'll have those coins in the front, but they will not have the escalator, the roller-to escalator. Or it's conceivable you could have the original mechanism with the escalator in it, but the castings have been reproduced. But roller tops are famous and favorites for reproductions. And the person who bought it might have knew it was a reproduction, but it's since been sold 2 or 3 times. And the person who sells it to you doesn't have a clue that there's reproduction. So you want to kind of be careful before you put out a bunch of money. You really want to know what you're doing, or go with somebody who knows slot machines. Or if you're going to somewhere like Chicagoland show, get to know some of the dealers, and they'll go with you and say, hey, is this thing real? Or most of the dealers are reputable, so it wouldn't be a question. They would know if it's a repro or not. But you just want to be careful what you're buying, because slot machines have been reproduced. At least the 1930s and some of the 40s machines have been reproduced. The mechanisms might be original, but the castings, which is where the original part, and that's where the beauty of it lies, are reproductions. So you got to kind of be careful and look at the casting and see the mechanism probably is original, but there's been repro parts as well as mechs made, but the castings or reproductions are the problem.
Okay. So let's move to electromechanical.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about mechanical machines, and you have several beautiful electromechanical machines in your game room as well. And most of your electromechanical machines are console slots or floor standing slots.
Right.
Right. So let's start with 3 Bells.
Okay.
Now, 3 Bells has 3 different pay acceptors, right? There's 3 different chutes that you can put money into. And what does that do for you?
All it does was try and get a bigger market share. So if somebody, you want to have 3 different players, or maybe a person who came with a bunch of change in his pocket, he could play a nickel, a dime, or a quarter. Mm-hmm. Or you might have 3 different people playing, because it's got only one set of reels. It's the same basic Mills mechanism, but it's electromechanical for the lights and the payout mechanism. The payout mechanisms, there's 3 different. Well, on the 3 Bells, the dime payout is a purely mechanical slide payout, just like any countertop machine. It was only the nickel and the quarter that were electromechanical, and they had coin slicers, so they had 2 tubes, and if you hit a winner, it would slice out the correct number of coins. So it was just meant for more of a country club kind of setting, or they had them on riverboats, or whatever. But you were trying to get multiple people to play at the same time, or one person to play with just different denominations.
Okay, but the payout amounts would not be any different.
No, they'd be the same. It'd just be whatever denomination you played.
Right.
So the dime was actually a mechanical one.
Oh, so I guess, yeah, if you're playing a quarter, then your payout would be more than 2 nickels, for example, for 2 cherries, right?
Yeah, you get 2 quarters.
2 quarters,
yeah. Right. Exactly.
And so I envision that there's at least 3 different relays in there that handle the lamps.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's multiple relays. Well, for the coin acceptance, because the coin acceptance was electronic too.
Okay.
So the coin acceptance relays, and then the master relay to set it all up, and then the payout relay. So you have 3 payout relays too for the nickel. Well, the dime was a mechanical payout for that one. Did
right?
You have coin release and such. So yeah, there's. I don't have it open. I'm looking at it right now, but I don't have the thing open. We did this one years ago. That was kind of an interesting deal because I got it from that first slot machine dealer that I bought that first mechanical slot in from like late 81, 1982. I got the 3 bells and the 4 bells, which is his sister machine, from his ex-wife. I mean, he and his wife parted ways, and she ended up with some of the machines that was actually in her house. And I only paid like $250 for the 2 machines, but they weren't restored. They were kind of a mess. And actually, the mechanism on the 3 bells is not the correct mechanism. It's a 4 bells mechanism, which is close, but not exactly the same. So Jeff helped me to figure out how we got it working, and we finally did get it working for that. But yeah, I went to her house, and she was with another man at that point, and divorced the first dealer that I'd met for the slot machines. And I remember we go there, and we're supposed to go pick up these machines, and one of my friends went with me to haul it in his truck. Mm-hmm. And she kept us waiting for like 45 minutes. She said, "We're going to go down and eat dinner, and I'll sell you the machines after dinner." So my friend and I are looking at each other like we'd already set up the time and agreed. So we ended up just kind of cooling our heels for like 45 minutes till she was pretty rough, as was her original husband. They were both kind of rough customers. Like the guy got the slot machines out of Tennessee. I mean, he was probably one of the people that dropped a dime on the establishment to get the machines out of there to the police. I mean, he was a rough customer, kind of an unsavory person. I wouldn't even go into some of the who literally was a felon person that I thank God lost touch with him many years ago and want to keep it that way. But he was a pretty unsavory character all the way around. Let's just leave it at that. As nasty individual. But it was his ex-wife is where I got those 2 machines from.
Well, the 3 bells is incredibly attractive. I think the mirroring and the graphics on top. You've got the mermaids flanking the actual reels, and in the back you've got that topper that kind of sits on it that has 3 bells.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, for these console machines, how common was it to have some kind of vertical feature like that to draw attention?
Not too common. I'm trying to remember if it was I think it was the 3 bells, so this is the 4 bells. One of them did not have the back on it. One of them was just flat, but I think that was the pre-war, and then the post-war had that vertical feature with the 3 bells on it. They were trying to attract your attention, of course. Yeah. And all this stuff, but that was kind of unusual to have something like that, except for the machine that sits next to it, the Bally Drawbell. That's got like a back glass on it, and that's I picked up one of them, and I've got one of them here too. And that's the one that I saw when I first got interested in the slot machines in 1977, approximately. That I was dating that girl and was in the neighbor's back porch. It was a Bally Drawbell. And that's the one that I always wanted to. I thought, oh, that's a neat machine. And at that Chicagoland show, probably 25 years ago, there was a Bally Drawbell, and it's this one I have here now. And I didn't pay much for it. I wasn't even sure if it was correct or complete or whatever. It was the cord to plug it in. It was out in the parking lot, where the dealers were at. It's outside, and I ended up buying this machine for a little over $100.
Wow!
And I had no idea if it worked. But it's like, this is the first one that I saw, and I looked at it and said, well, it's got the mechanism in it. I see relays in here. I don't know it's all complete. That was the first machine I saw back in 1977 when I was dating that girl that the guy wanted $1,000 for. That I wasn't going to pay. And I have one now, but I've got that Chicagoland, not the same machine, of course, but the same style, same mech, same model. And it's a fun machine to play because it is a drawbell. You put a coin in, you push down the handle, and the 3 reels spin and stop. And you can hold reels 1, 2, or 3, and put another coin in. And let's say, hey, I've got a cherry lemon or something like that. Where you hold down the first reel, put another nickel in, and then if you get a cherry in the second one, you get a winner. So it's a fun machine to play. And they did, Valley did that later in the electromechanical years. They had a drawbell kind of machine, late 60s or early 70s, an EM machine. Same concept. But this one's from like 1946.
Wow.
This is the first one I saw. Even before I saw a countertop slot machine, I'd seen them in movies, but this is the first one I saw up close, and that's why I wanted to get one of them. So I really hit the jackpot, so to speak, on this one. It was complete, and I took it all apart and fixed it and stuff, and Jeff helped me on a few things, but it really was actually in pretty good shape. It was actually quite a buy. But like any kind of electromechanical device, you have no idea if they're working when you get them.
Right.
Or if they're complete, correct, missing relays or missing whatever. This was totally correct.
Great.
Totally complete. It needed to be cleaned. Really well cleaned. It was gross inside, but actually some mice had gotten into the back glass and had built a nest there, so I had to clean that up.
That's always the best. Yeah.
Oh, that was gross. No, I think that's the only time that's happened to me. Maybe one other machine, but the mice had gotten into it, so they cleaned all that out. But other than that, it was all there. I mean, I did some of the back glass was not in great shape, or the front, the horizontal glass. There, I ended up having to repaint some of that. That was not in great shape, but that was an aesthetic angle I was able to pretty much fix. Mm-hmm. But the mechanism was there, and the relays were there. It was all there, so it was a blast to have it working.
Always a good thing. And so that drawbell, you're only able to hold one time, correct? Or can you hold up to 2 reels?
You can hold all 3 if you wanted to, but I think you'd only do 2 at a time on it. But you have a selection of which ones you want to do.
Right. Okay. So, and then you spin after holding, and then you can't hold that time.
No, it's just one more time. You only do it one more time. You get your original pull, your original nickel and pull, handle pull, and then you can hold reels 1, 2, or 3 up to 2 and 3. You wouldn't want to hold all 3 if it wasn't a winner. It wouldn't make any sense.
Right.
But you'd hold 2 and 3 with you put another nickel in, and then you're done. So it's a fun machine to play.
Yeah. There's really a little more strategy involved in that one.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the more fun slots to play here. That's what's like. I wanted one of these, and when I saw it up in Chicago, I think it was the year I bought the Rollotop or something like that. And we were just getting ready to leave. I may have been up there with Jeff Lawton or Larry Sweeney. I can't remember. And I saw this machine. I said, "Oh, that's the first slot machine I saw at that time, 15 years ago." And so I got to get this. And I went to the guy, and we were getting ready to leave. And I said, "How much you want for it?" And it was like $110 or $120, something like that. It wasn't much. And I said, "Let's do it." And then we loaded it onto either Jeff or Larry's truck. I can't remember who I was with. And we brought it home. So it was fun.
So how much do those weigh?
Probably about 200 pounds or so.
Okay.
They're not quite as heavy as you'd think they'd be, but they're heavy enough. They're heavy enough. If you have 3 bells and 4 bells are probably heavier than that.
So you know when you've lifted one, is what you're saying.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Your back will know when you've lifted one.
Right.
It might remind you for a very long time. Hopefully not with surgery. But no, the drawbells are like 200 pounds. I think the 3 bells, 4 bells are more like 300 pounds or more. They're heavy. Okay. And you can take the mechanism out of the 3 bells and the 4 bells, or for that matter, the drawbell. You can even take that out, unplug it, and unplug the Jones plugs, and then take it out. But they're still heavy. But the drawbell's not as big as the 3 bells or 4 bells. They're monsters.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, they appear to be. So.
Well, and Dick Bushell, so the guy I mentioned who's the overall godfather of the industry until he passed in 1998. He was always promoting the industry and stuff, and he always said that the console slot machines of the 30s and 40s would become the floor machines of our generation and such, and they never really did because they take up so much space. Mm-hmm. Unlike pinball machines or bingos, where they take up a lot of space. Most of your slot machines that are out there, even the newer electromechanical or electronic ones, which are heavier, they don't take up that much counter space. But a console slot machine takes up a lot of space. And there's a number of different models out there. There's quite a few made by Pace and Jennings and Mills. They take up a lot of space. And so people who have generally gravitated towards slot machines generally don't want them. They went for very little money years ago. Like I said, I bought these 2, 3 bells, 4 bells, but they weren't working. It took quite a while to get them going. For $250, I bought the drawbell for $100 and some bucks, 110, 120, whatever. They'll go for more now, but they've never really caught up with the countertop slot machines. They're just easier to move around into place and to put in the game room and such, or even the electromechanical or electronic games.
Gotcha.
So I don't really buy machines so much anymore. Mostly I just fix other people's machines because I've filled up my game room. But I still don't think they sell that well, because they just take up so much space.
Mm-hmm.
They really do.
Yeah, they are pretty monstrous.
Yeah, they are. They're fun.
They are.
I always thought they were really cool.
Yeah, I agree.
I thought they're cool. And it taught me a bunch of stuff about electromechanical, too, so it was fun.
And they look like they'd be, I mean, I haven't seen inside any of them, but they appear that they'd be pretty convenient to work on.
Yeah, they're not bad, because especially, most of them, they're pretty much open. I mean, you got some relays and stuff, but they're even easier, I think, to work on than a bingo or something like that. I mean, they're just right there. You just lift up the lid and there's the mechanism, there's the relays, there's the coin slicers and such. They're not too bad. The 3 bells was a real challenge because we didn't have the right mechanism for it. The mech was basically right, but it was a 4 bells mech, so the wiring was totally wrong. So with Jeff's help, I was able to rewire it and get it going. That was kind of a blast.
He's a great guy.
Absolutely.
He's a good guy to know. So 4 bells, what's the big draw with that one?
That one is just, once again, 4 players could play with it, or one person if they wanted to do it. But there'd be each of the different shoots you put. They only took 1 coin at a time, but they each have a special. So your orange, instead of just paying out the normal 10 coins, would pay out 20. Or the plum, instead of paying out the normal 14 coins, would pay out 28. So it doubled everything. That was a bell special, and then a bar special, 8 or 3 bars. So that was the thing about this one, and it's a neat machine when you hit it and it's a winner. When you hear the coins pay out, because I remember I can't remember if it was the Mills. I think it was the promotional. The promotional came out from Mills, and they came out with this machine. I think initially in the early '40s, and then it came out after World War II also. They said it sounds like the mint tipped over. So it really is fun. You hear all these coins coming out. It's pretty neat. So it's pretty spectacular when you hit a winner. On it, but the specials are just, like I say, either the orange or the plum or the bell or the bar, and it just doubles your payout, your normal payout, or in the case of the bar, triple payout.
Excellent.
So it's kind of fun.
So just we're in the home stretch here.
Okay.
Just a few more questions about some oddities here that I saw in this book, and I wanted to ask you about.
Sure.
951 Jennings Tic-Tac-Toe. Have you ever played one of those?
Yeah, I've played them. I never owned one, but yeah, I've played those.
Are they neat?
Yeah, those are fun because they're gimmicks machines to the extent because they'll have different holes in the payout discs that are attached to the reels, so that's how you do the tic-tac-toe, as I recall. Mm-hmm. So, and it's really a gimmick in that it's the way you've drilled out the reel discs to have winners and such. It just allowed more fun payouts. Allowed you to do that. So that's a fun one. That's a fun one.
Another one that caught my eye was the Bally Slimline Standard and Progressive, and really the Progressive is the one that caught my eye because it had the Progressive jackpot that's displayed with score reels up at the top.
That's electromechanical, right? And
yes.
Yes.
And that looked pretty cool, and I bet the interior is very similar to a Bally EM pinball machine. Mm-hmm.
I think you're right.
Construction. Yeah.
I think you're right. And of course, what they're trying to do is get people with the Progressive and the ones who would add up the points and all that stuff, or the winnings. They're trying to get people to play.
Well, yeah.
Get them in the door. And so that's what they're really doing with that. They're trying to entice people to play and spend more money than they might otherwise do. And they're still doing that in the casinos. Same kind of deal.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure that theory carries on today. 1973's Bally Circus is interesting. It's got the same mechanism that's used in a Bally pinball machine, and the mechanism was called the Time Tunnel. I forget what the name of the machine was. Was it Space Time? It was something like that.
I'm not sure.
But it's a series of 5 rotating discs, and they shimmy around in a circle, and they're oddly shaped, the cams that it rides in. Okay. And so they all move independently, and depending on which one is lined up, you earn a certain amount of bonus points.
Huh.
And that looks pretty interesting. But another thing that caught my eye, and I believe you've got one of these as well, is a machine that this Bally Circus has, the replay counter.
Okay.
Very, very similar to the bingos.
Right.
And in this case, you would push a button and it would pay out from the replay counter.
Right. I've got the Continental, the 4-reel Continental.
Right.
I'm not sure my replay counter is working right. It's all there on that because I wasn't buying it for the replay. I was buying it for the right to left, left to right 4-reel. But yeah, they came with that. That's right. They absolutely did.
It's pretty neat, and that mechanism is very cool mechanically. The replay counters. It's very simple, but you've got just one little piece that rides along, and when it hits a certain number, it'll rotate the next one. And it's all mechanical. It doesn't really know what number is displayed.
Huh.
And then there's a stop at the end, and so when it hits 0, it knows that.
Okay, sure.
In the bingos, it triggers a switch. I'm not sure how it works in the slots, but
yeah. I think mine's been disabled. If it's even there on the Continental, but I had a replay on it. But they try to reapply stuff. They do repurpose the games. It makes sense. I mean, if you got the mechanism or the technology or the manufacturing, you might as well just reapply it as many times as you can instead of reinventing something.
That's right.
Absolutely.
So
entice the players.
On the Continental, that's a really fascinating machine, and Phil Hooper, who is big in the bingo world, had turned me on to that one because it's very similar-ish to a bingo. You've got advancing odds.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
right.
So the more coins you pay in, the more it will pay
the
out.
The more you pay out, yeah, and that you'll see that slot machine, of course, today with the multiplier effect there. And that makes it kind of fun too because you win a lot of coins.
Yeah. If
you do hit them on that. That I like the Continental. I bought that. That was a couple of the last machines I bought in 2006. I think it was. I bought a fortune telling scale, or not a lollipop scale. I have in the basement, and then that the Continental. I got one from Frank Zingman, who's since passed away. His son now runs his booth up there in Chicagoland and has a lot of slot machines he brings every time. But it was, I picked up one of them because I thought it was a neat machine with the advancing odds, and there's Continentals. They used to be pretty common. Now they're hard to get. You don't see as many because they just ended up in people's collections.
Right.
When I bought that one in 2006, that was the last one. I called several of Jeff Lawton's friends trying to find one, as well as contacts I knew, and couldn't find one. Nobody had one to sell. And like 3-4 years earlier, they were just about giving them away. But over time, they've gotten to be harder and harder to find inventory. And I didn't have a whole lot more space. I already had one 5-line electromechanical Bally, and I wanted to get another one. And I saw that 4-reel Continental. I said, "Oh, this is a cool one." And Jeff had one or two of them, and I said, "Oh, I'll have to get one of those." And I was finally able to get one at the Chicagoland show up there. But they're fun. They're fun games to play. Mm-hmm. They really are. They definitely are.
Well, Sal, I wanted to thank you very much for coming on and taking the time to talk with me, and for having me over to your excellent game room. I mean, I had a blast.
I'm glad you did. I'm glad to host you on that. And like I said, you got subscribers that have questions on slot machines, especially the old mechanical ones. I can help them on, or they need photos to make sure whatever they're thinking about buying is all there. Mm-hmm. They're more than welcome to contact me. I'm always trying to promote the hobby.
Excellent.
So,
and
glad to help.
What's the best way to contact you?
Probably I guess my email, just the email address.
Okay.
Would do that. The Mazzeo essay at fuse.net would probably the home email. Just shoot me one there, and then I'll respond. So if they can get a hold of you if they have a hard time spelling it or something like that. Yep. But probably email is probably the best way.
Excellent.
To do that.
And very good. And I'll include that in the show notes. And
okay, great.
Hopefully you don't get bombarded with 1,000 questions a day.
I won't. That's fine. People, I'm wanting to promote the hobby, so that's okay. Yeah. That's not a problem.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Sal. And
my pleasure.
I want to thank my guest, Sal Mazzeo, for coming on the show. And I'd like to thank you for listening. My name again is Nick Baldridge. You can reach me at For Amusement Only Podcast at gmail.com, or you can call me on the Bingos line, That's 724-BINGOS1, 724-246-4671. You can listen to us on Google Play Music now. They just started that service. Pocket Casts, via iTunes, on Stitcher. You can follow us on Facebook at For Amusement Only Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at Bingo Podcast. And you can follow us on Instagram, also at Bingo Podcast. If you'd like, you can also listen to the show on our website, which is foramusementonly.libsyn.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.